Chapter 501, Demon Sank Beast. Breakthrough. A few minutes later, the injuries of Elder Hu and the others had fully recovered. Every single one of them was overflowing with vitality. Thank you, Xianxia. The crowd expressed their gratitude. Even though they had already paid for the services, so they didn't owe anything to Xianxia, the other party's medical skill was still simply way too astonishing. It was almost miraculous, and it was hard to believe that someone in the world was capable of such a feat. The demon sank beast has already been tamed by Xianxia, so it would be a waste of time if we were to remain here. Thus, I won't be imposing on you all any longer. Farewell. Hall Master Han clasped his fist and bade his farewell. His primary objective here was to tame the demon sank beast. However, since Xianxia had already tamed it, there was no reason for him to remain here any longer. Even though he had failed to tame the demon sank beast, he had recovered from his trauma. With this alone, he was confident that he could triumph over Luo Ming and obtain the qualification to study at the headquarters. So, his final objective could be said to have been met. In a sense, his trip wasn't wasted. Farewell. Xianxia, Hall Master Sai, and the others clasped their fists as well. Given how talented Xianxia is, if I'm not mistaken, you should be participating in the Master Teacher Tournament 2 months from now, right? I'll definitely head there personally to support you. Hall Master Han chuckled before leaving. Given the extent of the other party's capability and his identity as a master teacher, and considering the major affairs surrounding the Myriad Kingdom City during this period of time, it wasn't too difficult to deduce his next objective. No matter what, he owed the other party a debt. If there was a chance, he would like to repay it. Besides, given the other party's immense capability and his proficiency in various occupations, he was a person worth befriending. After Hall Master Han and the others left, the area grew quiet once more. Xianxia, do we enter the tomb now or do we rest here first? Luo Zhu looked at Xianxia with a look of admiration. The previous time he came here, he had to operate secretly for fear of being noticed by the demon sank beast. Yet, the person before him had managed to tame this notorious fellow. This was something he could never have imagined in the past. With the threat from the demon sank beast out of the way, there wasn't any reason for them to rush anymore. They could enter the tomb whenever they liked. Hold on for a moment. We'll enter after I solve the problem the demon sank beast is suffering from. Xianxia waved his hands. Problem? It isn't injured though. The crowd was perplexed. This big fellow possessed such mighty strength and its defense was invincible within the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. Even when battling against Hall Master Han and the others, it was able to crush all of them easily. Solving its problem? What kind of problem could it have? The soul-devouring ants don't have much of an influence on ordinary life forms and humans. However, they are yin attribute life forms, otherwise they wouldn't have sustained themselves by consuming souls, and after loitering around this area for a month or two, even if the demon sank beast didn't really come into contact with them, it would still be affected by the yin energy they exude. Placing his hands behind his back, Xianxia explained impassively. The intense battle just a moment ago caused the yin energy to seep into its internal organs. If it isn't cleared away swiftly, it'll be hard for it to achieve any breakthroughs in the future. There's actually such a matter. If that's the case, shouldn't we stay away from those soul-devouring ants as well? Upon hearing that even a powerful existence like the demon sank beast would be affected by the soul-devouring ants, everyone was alarmed. They immediately scanned their surroundings warily. At this moment, after consuming the cooked deer horde beast, the satisfied soul-devouring ants had burrowed back underground. Thus, there wasn't any trace of them left on the surface. If they hadn't witnessed it personally, it would have been difficult for them to believe that this ancient creature, which hadn't been sighted for such a long period of time, truly existed in the world. To consume even formations. It was truly a fearsome existence. It'll be fine as long as you all don't consume the water from the lake. Xianxia said, the soul-devouring ants can sense that the soul oracle tomb is beneath the lake. Thus, even though the water may seem clean, it is actually filled with the corpses of these fellows. One of the main reasons why the demon sank beast is plagued by the yin energy of these fellows is due to drinking the water from the lake. Everyone came to a realization. These creatures were drawn here by the scent of the soul oracle tomb. Realizing that the tomb was beneath the lake, it was inevitable that some of them would be unable to resist the allure and attempt to head for the Soul Oracle tomb. As time slowly passed, the water became unsafe for consumption. Then, how can this problem be solved? Luo Zhu asked. Since even the demon-sank beast could be plagued by the yin energy, what should they do if they were affected as well? Everyone also turned their gazes over. They wanted to know the solution so that they would know what to do if they were to ingest the water from the lake accidentally. Simple, you just have to chew on the grass by the side. Xianxia pointed. Chew on the grass. Taken aback, everyone instinctively turned to the demon-sank beast, which was still busy chewing on the grass, with a dumbfounded expression. They thought that Xianxia's act of ordering the demon-sank beast to chew on grass was a punishment, but from the looks of it now, it seemed like he had another motive in mind. This explained why this massive fellow didn't feel displeased in the slightest. It even went on and munched on the grass excitedly. If I'm not mistaken, this should be blue rain grass, right? This grass can be found all around the mountain. However, if I recall correctly, this grass should have no particular attribute at all. Why would eating this grass clear away the yin energy in one's body? Hall Master Sai was bewildered. As an appraiser, he boasted vast knowledge. As such, he was able to identify the grass in an instant. Blue rain grass grew on mountainous areas that were near a water source. It didn't have any effect or attribute, and as such, it couldn't even be considered as a medicinal herb. Why would it be able to expel the yin energy from the soul-devouring ants? It's true that this grass primarily has no attribute or effect. However, one has to take their environment into consideration as well. If it's the patch of grass over there, it'll be completely ineffective. Xianxia pointed. He was pointing at the dense bunch of blue rain grasses that grew by the side of the lake. Everyone blinked their eyes in bewilderment. It was just a distance of several dozen meters. Why would the grass over there be ineffective? There was nothing different with their environment at all. Seeing the doubt on everyone's faces, Xianxia smiled and shook his head. This is where the demon-sank beast relieved itself. In other words, it is its toilet. Toilet. Everyone blinked. The demon-sank beast carries the dragon bloodline, which is rich in yang energy. Naturally, its waste product carries powerful yang attribute. Under such nourishment, the blue rain grass in that area naturally took on this attribute as well. After explaining, Xianxia turned to look at them and said, "If you are worried, you can cut a few stalks and bring it along with you. The moment you realize that something is amiss, just take a bunch out and chew on it." "I'll pass." "Xianxia, thank you for your advice. However, since you said it's fine, there should be no need to do so." Everyone hurriedly waved their hands. They were still agitated over it a moment ago, but after learning that those were grass which the demon-sank beast used to relieve itself, they immediately lost their interest. Knowing what the crowd was thinking, Xianxia didn't touch on the topic any further. Instead, he walked up to the demon-sank beast. At this moment, this gigantic fellow had already consumed a huge quantity of blue rain grass already. The yang energy within its body was gradually searing the yin energy accumulated within its body. Taking out a few silver needles, Xianxia casually pierced them into several locations on the demon-sank beast. Boom! A loud explosion sounded, and everyone immediately felt the demon-sank beast's aura rising swiftly. Is it going to make a breakthrough? Hall Master Sai and Jin Songhai stared at one another in shock. At Transcendent Mortal 5 Dan, one's soul would become even more harmonized with the environment, thus augmenting one's strength greatly. If the first 4 Dans of the Transcendent Mortal Realm, prolonged longevity, origin energy, yin-yang, and clarifying turbidity, could be considered as refining one's Xianxia and enhancing one's control over the environment, then from this realm onward, one's soul would be nourished and tempered. This was precisely the reason why even though Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan Pinnacle Master Teachers, despite their strength, could only be considered as 4-star Master Teacher. Unable to produce long-range tutelage Jade Token, they couldn't be considered to have reached half 5-star. Only when one's cultivation had reached consonant spirit would one be able to sever a sliver of one's soul to seal it within a tutelage Jade Token to guide others. One could say that the gap between Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan and 5 Dan concerned the metamorphosis of one's soul, and it was a major hurdle to overcome. Many people were stuck at this step, unable to make a breakthrough until the end of their lives. Despite the long history of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance and the innumerable talents who had come and gone, there were less than a few who had managed to surpass this boundary. And for spirit beasts, due to their weaker souls, it was far harder for them to make this breakthrough compared to humans. This fellow was already at transcendent mortal 4-dan pinnacle, and yet, at this moment, its aura was currently rising swiftly. Could it really be attempting to break through to the consonant spirit realm? The duo hurriedly turned their gazes over. It can't make the breakthrough yet. Seeing the agitation on the faces of the duo, Xianxia replied calmly, "All beings in the world are made equal." Due to the overwhelmingly powerful physical body of the demon-sank beast, it was harder for its soul to make a metamorphosis. Similarly, if one's soul is too strong, under normal circumstances, one's physical body wouldn't be too strong. After contemplating for a moment, Xianxia said, "However, after consuming the blue rain grass, the yin energy has melded as one with the yang energy. At the same time, I've also cleared some of its meridians. Thus, it's inevitable that it'll enjoy a huge leap in its cultivation. Even though this isn't sufficient for it to reach consonant spirit realm, half-consonant spirit shouldn't be a problem." Half-consonant spirit. That's already very fearsome. If I recall correctly, the old ancestor of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance is also at this realm. Hearing those words, the duo still leaped in shock. Half-consonant spirit, similar to half Xianxia and half Zhizhuan, referred to a person who was infinitesimally close to consonant spirit realm but had yet to take the last step forward. Not only was the physical body of an expert at this level strong, his soul would tend to be exceptionally powerful as well. No transcendent mortal 4-dan pinnacle expert would be his match. If, say, the demon-sank beast was already overpowered due to its dragon bloodline and talents, it would be even more fearsome now. If it were to go on a rampage, even the old ancestor of Myriad Kingdom Alliance wouldn't be able to stand against it. Formidable. Hong long long. Amidst the shocked gazes of the duo, the demon-sank beast's rising aura finally came to a halt. Just as Xianxia had guessed, it didn't manage to make the final breakthrough into consonant spirit realm, stopping at half-consonant spirit instead. Even so, with this strength, there was already no one who could subdue it in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance already raw. Knowing that it was only with his master's help that his cultivation had risen and his trauma resolved, it rushed forward excitedly to Xianxia and bowed respectfully. Previously, it had only feared the other party due to the high possibility of the other party being a pure-blooded dragon due to his ability to utter the dragon language. However, at this moment, he felt truly grateful to the other party. If not for him, it wouldn't have been able to reach this realm without a century of hard work. Seeing its attitude, Xianxia knew that this fellow was sincerely swearing fealty to him this time. Thus, he nodded his head in satisfaction and instructed, "That's right, we're diving to the bottom of the lake. Guard the area outside for us. If any human or beast dares to barge into this area, kill them without exception." The situation below was still a mystery, and having to watch their backs for enemies while exploring the region would have been troublesome. With this large fellow guarding in the area, they wouldn't have to worry about any knives behind their back. Roar. The demon-sank beast nodded its head. "All right, let's set off." After giving out the necessary instructions, Xianxia surveyed the surroundings before leaping into the lake along with Luo Zhu. Zhao Yue and the others quickly followed suit. After so much hard work, the Soul Oracle Tomb was finally right before them. Chapter 502. Celestial Designer. The lake was frigid and everyone immediately felt a bone-piercing chill as soon as they stepped in. Following behind Luo Zhu, Xianxia dived down into the lake. Even the weakest among the crowd was at Zhizhuan realm. At that level, holding one's breath for 20 to 30 minutes wasn't a problem at all. Even though Zhao Feiwu's cultivation was slightly lacking, Jin Songhai used his Xianxia to form a protective layer around her and kept transfusing Xianxia to her. As such, she was able to avoid suffocation. Initially, with the light that shone through the surface of the lake, they could still see the situation before them. However, as they went deeper in, darkness began to envelop them. Prepared, Luo Zhu took out a few night illumination pearls and passed one to everyone. Under the gentle light, the underwater world appeared clearly before them. Due to the excessive frigidity of the water, there were no life forms in it. Swimming downward, At around a depth of 70 to 80 meters deep, they finally saw the bottom of the lake. Corals of various differing colors filled area. It was impossible to speak underwater, so Luo Zhu communicated via gesturing to the crowd. He adept maneuvered around the coral-filled ground and advanced. Before long, a cliff appeared before them. The surface of the cliff was smooth, and it didn't seem as though there was anything unique about it. If one didn't know that a Soul Oracle tomb was hidden within it beforehand, it would be impossible to know that there was a hidden mechanism on it. Flicking his wrist, Luo Zhu took out a stone plate, and after feeling about the wall for a moment, he found a precise aperture and inserted the stone plate into it. Jia! A mechanism was activated. The cliff suddenly came to life and started opening up. What exquisite craftsmanship! Xianxia's eyes lit up. Even though it was a mechanism created out of rock, there wasn't even the slightest mark on its surface that betrayed its identity. It might be less intricate than the Celestial Designer mechanical container, but its craftsmanship was still far superior compared to the other artifacts he had seen before. It seemed like the craftsman who built this Soul Oracle tomb was an expert. Even at worst, he must have at least reached 9 Mo. Legend had it that 9 Mo craftsmen were capable of creating machineries and puppets which even transcendent mortal experts would be unable to see through. From the looks of it, the legend was indeed true. It was no wonder why Luo Zhu was so confident that no one other than him would be able to find this location. Given how obscure the location was, it would indeed be very difficult to find it. The opening of the cliff face revealed an entrance. Luo Zhu took the lead and stepped in. There were several unique mechanisms to keep out water inside the cavern, blocking the flow of water. As the crowd stepped in, they immediately realized that the area was well ventilated. There wasn't the slightest feeling that the room was stuffy that came from lack of oxygen. This is the passageway to the Soul Oracle tomb. At the very end is the tomb itself. After everyone entered the passageway, the cliff face automatically closed by itself. UN. Xianxia nodded. The crowd looked at their surroundings in interest. This was a narrow passageway. Under the illumination from the night illumination pearls, the group saw all kinds of inscriptions on the surface of the wall. Most of them were regarding the various rituals that Soul Oracles conducted. A sinister air loomed in the area. We should proceed slowly. There are a lot of fearsome traps placed along the passageway. Familiar with the environment within the ancient tomb, Luo Zhu reached forward and 2 child-sized puppets appeared before him. He had probably prepared these puppets specially for this occasion. Placing 2 spirit stones into them, the puppets headed straight down the passageway. Jeji! Jeji! Barely after the first puppet took 3 steps, a strong gust of wind blew, and with a crisp sound, the puppet burst into smithereens. Everyone narrowed their eyes. The puppet that Luo Zhu took was crafted using a unique material known for its sturdiness. Even a cultivator of Jin Songhai's caliber would find it hard to smash it in a single blow. And yet, some unknown mechanism before them had caused it to be reduced to smithereens in a moment. If not for Luo Zhu warning everyone swiftly, that could have been the fate of one of them. In an instant, cold sweat immediately drenched the back of everyone here. As expected of one of the most feared occupations in the ancient era, the Soul Oracle tomb was indeed extraordinary. If Xianxia hadn't seen through Luo Zhu's possession and allowed the Soul Oracle to guide them through this area, their entire group would have most probably been wiped out before even reaching the Soul Oracle tomb. Jeji! Jeji! While everyone was still overwhelmed with shock, the second puppet advanced forward. However, barely after it took a few steps, just like the first puppet, it was smashed to smithereens as well. Within 5 steps, there are 2 death traps. I'll go on first and mark out the spot where you all should step on. Make sure to follow it closely, otherwise, I'll be unable to guarantee your safety. Luo Zhu instructed gravely. Yes. Knowing the importance of this issue, everyone nodded their heads. Who? Luo Zhu proceeded forward carefully. However, as soon as he stepped forward, the whistling of the wind sounded and it shot past an area not too far away from him. From the looks of it, if one were to be struck by it, one wouldn't be too far from death even if one managed to survive that attack. However, with a puppet to test out the path, they would be able to avoid the traps in the way. Looking at the treacherous passageway, Hall Master Sai asked, "Is this a formation?" Given how danger was lying in wait throughout the passageway, could this be a slaughter formation? If that was the case, given Xianxia's understanding of formations, they should have been able to break it and advance safely through. It isn't. Xianxia shook his head. If it was a formation, he would have surely felt a disturbance in the spiritual energy in the air. But there clearly was none. The greatest fear of the soul oracles aren't humans but soul-devouring ants, and formations are ineffective on those creatures. Thus, it is unlikely for a soul oracle to incorporate a formation into their defensive mechanisms. If I'm not mistaken, these are mechanical traps. After a moment of contemplation, Xianxia had finished his analysis. The soul-devouring ants were the nemesis of soul oracles, so naturally, they had to prepare some traps to protect themselves. Soul-devouring ants were capable of consuming the spiritual energy contained within a formation and forcefully halt it. Thus, mechanical traps were preferred as to formations. The crowd nodded in agreement. But if those are all mechanical traps, this will prove to be troublesome. None of us here are adept in this field. If only we had a celestial designer here, we'd be really spared a lot of trouble. Hall Master Sai frowned. Celestial designer. Sun Qiong and the others looked over. Xianxia had never mentioned such an occupation, so they had never heard of it. Indeed, celestial designer, also known as master mechanic, is an occupation of the lower 9 paths. They are skilled in designing these mechanical systems. Even though their creation might seem humble on the surface, they usually incorporate sword chi and battle techniques that could overpower even experts when they are activated. Hall Master Sai explained, this occupation also has their own organization, the Celestial Designer Institute. They specialize in designing the world's most exquisite weapon and traps. However, I've only read about this occupation in books. There isn't a branch in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, and it's said that only an empire of Huanyu Empire's tier is qualified to build a branch. The artifacts designed by celestial designers are extremely complex and exquisite. It would indeed be difficult to bypass these traps without understanding the logic behind them. Xianxia nodded his head as a frown slowly appeared on his forehead. He had seen the complexity of the celestial designer mechanical container himself. If not for the Library of Heaven's Path, it would be impossible for him to open it. Even a single box could be designed so intricately. If a person of that occupation had assisted with the design of the traps in this passageway, the dangers that lurked in this passageway would be unimaginable. If a celestial designer had assisted with the design of the traps in this passageway, the dangers that lurked in this passageway would be unimaginable. Just as Xianxia was deep in thought, he heard the sound of a sharp knife tearing through flesh. Lifting his gaze, he saw Luo Zhu hurriedly retreating with a reddened face. His arm seemed to have been sliced by something, and it was bleeding profusely. Are you all right? Jin Songhai and the others hurried forward to help him stop the bleeding. I'm all right. Luo Zhu shook his head. The traps in this passageway seem to have become even more complicated than before. Even more complicated? How long is this passageway? How long did you take to reach the end? Xianxia asked. It is around 300 meters. The previous time I was here, I advanced bit by bit using the puppets and it took me around 4 days to get to the other end. Luo Zhu frowned. However, it seems like these traps change every single time one enters. My previous experience clearing the traps is completely useless now. 4 days. Xianxia was speechless. To travel 300 meters in 4 days, this passageway was indeed difficult. Indeed. But there's no other way around it. The sword chi contained within the traps possess the might of at least a transcendent mortal 4-dan pinnacle. If one were to accidentally come into contact with it, one will be torn into half in an instant. Luo Zhu shook his head. Transcendent mortal 4-dan pinnacle sword chi. The crowd was astonished. When they saw the puppet being reduced to smithereens previously, they already had an idea that the sword chi emanated in the traps were fearsome. Even so, they didn't expect it to be so powerful. Even a transcendent mortal 4-dan pinnacle expert would find it difficult to survive after being struck by such powerful sword chi. Not to mention, it would be difficult for them to dodge the attacks in such a narrow passageway. Do we really have no other choice other than to advance bit by bit?
Zhao Feiwu frowned.
That's right. The trap mechanisms left behind by celestial designers are incomparably profound, and they are ever-changing. If one doesn't know the pattern behind the changes, it'll be difficult to clear the traps.
Luo Zhu shook his head.
It won't work even if we were to destroy the mechanical system in this passageway. Xianxia frowned. Even formations, an intangible existence, could be stopped with a kick. If they could find the switch to the traps or the center of operation of the system, shouldn't it be possible to shut down the traps?
Destroy.
Luo Zhu smiled bitterly. How could it be that easy? Just like a water wheel, the artifacts left behind by celestial designers are constantly on the move. Even if one had the blueprint on hand, if one doesn't comprehend the logic behind it, it will be futile. If its designs could be overcome so easily, it wouldn't be such a feared occupation. Mechanical systems and formations were similar in the sense that even if an amateur were to have the blueprint in hand, if they couldn't understand the workings of the system, they would still be unable to decipher it. After all, mechanical systems were built to be continuously on the move. If one didn't understand the slightest bit of this occupation, one would be unable to get out of it alive, let alone destroy it.
Indeed.
This is the reason why celestial designers are feared. They are capable of incorporating mechanical systems into artifacts, thus crafting tools capable of slaughtering experts easily. Furthermore, these artifacts don't need to be powered by spirit stones. If I'm not mistaken, the energy required for powering these traps comes from the waterfall above. As such, unlike formations, compasses won't work. If one doesn't understand the logic behind the traps, one would never be able to overcome the traps.
Hall Master Sai nodded in agreement.
Compasses were capable of determining the flow of spiritual energy to detect the weak points of a formation. However, mechanical traps weren't powered by spiritual energy but kinetic energy. How were they supposed to decipher these traps? Hearing the analyses of the duo, the complexion of the crowd turned gloomy. The excitement from before had vanished altogether. Seeing that the morale is down, Xianxia shook his head and said, even though compasses won't work, it doesn't mean that there are no other methods of deciphering the traps. Let me give it a try. After which, Xianxia smiled faintly and gently touched the floor of the passageway with his palm. Chapter 503, Entering the Tomb, Be Careful. Seeing that Xianxia was touching the ground instead of studying the various logic governing the traps in the passageway, Luo Zhu felt faint-headed. Do you really think that you can analyze the entire mechanical system just by touching the ground? The traps designed by celestial designers were as complex and intricate as formations. There were innumerable types of mechanical system, and even for systems of the same type, there were countless variations. Not to mention, the design of the system would also affect its operation as well. Even a real celestial designer would have to take a long time analyzing the various properties of the mechanical system before being able to decipher it. No matter how skilled you are in the other occupations, it is impossible for you to apply the logic from those into this field. There's no need to panic. Allow me to rest for a moment first. After that, I'll continue testing out the traps with my puppets. Anyway, the one thing we aren't lacking is time. I've also brought sufficient water and rations, so there's no need to worry. Seeing that the morale was down, Luo Zhu consoled with a smile. In truth, his real occupation was a tomb raider, and he had already traversed such treacherous places innumerable times he was used to it. However, the others were different. Having never encountered such a fearsome trap, it was natural for them to feel apprehensive. There's no way around it. We don't understand such traps at all, so we'll be depending on you then.
Jin Songhai nodded.
Don't worry. Even though the complexity of the trap has increased, as long as I have sufficient time, I'm confident that I can still make it to the other end. You all just have to follow behind me.
Luo Zhu nodded.
Most experts or wealthy merchants would opt to hire a celestial designer to design their tombs for them, and so, he had already faced off with such traps many times throughout the years. Even though the trap had become more complicated, he didn't think that it would be a problem for him. Confident, Luo Zhu was just about to make preparations and make another attempt when he saw that Xianxia, who was done touching the ground, had stood up. The latter stretched his back before walking into the passageway. Xianxia. Luo Zhu immediately narrowed his eyes in fear. Despite having tested the area with his puppet beforehand, he was still nearly torn in half by some sword chi. Wasn't it suicidal to be charging in so recklessly? Panicking, Luo Zhu was just about to pull Xianxia out when the young man suddenly lifted his leg and kicked at the wall beside him. Hong long. An intense buzzing sound echoed throughout the cavern, and the crowd felt the ground beneath them shake. All right, the traps have been disabled. After which, the calm voice of the young man echoed. Before the crowd could react, he began walking in with widened strides. The traps have been disabled. Seeing how nothing was triggered despite Zhongxian's casual movements, Luo Zhu's expression made his frenzy apparent. What was going on? He had just tried it out for himself, and the trap in the passageway was clearly much stronger and complex from before. Even a person like him, who often hung out by the tombs, would find it hard to clear the entire passageway without half a month of effort. Yet, the other party managed to do it, with a single kick. Are you for real? This was a mechanical system designed by a celestial designer. Luo Zhu was already prepared to have several hundreds of his puppets destroyed, and yet, the other party, with a single kick. Luo Zhu was on the verge of going mad. He turned around to look at the crowd, only to see the others staring at him in bewilderment. Didn't you just prattle on about how formidable this thing was? Why did Xianxia manage to stop the entire thing with just a single kick? Let's go on. Luo Zhu felt stifled. However, given how Xianxia was capable of even dealing with a possession, it wasn't entirely impossible for him to have comprehended the various skills of celestial designers as well. Consoling himself like that, he advanced through the passageway. As expected, the traps in the passageway were truly disabled. Nothing was triggered as the group walked by. Soon, reaching the very end, a vast hall appeared before them. Upon seeing the hall, Luo Zhu said with a grim expression, "Previously, I was possessed as soon as I reached this point, so I didn't dare go any further." Zhongxian scanned the hall. Possessing a length and width of around 20 to 30 meters wide, it was reminiscent of an underground palace. At the very center of the hall were 4 huge ashen-green coffins. It was impossible to determine what material the coffins were made of, but they looked extremely heavy. Eye of insight. Instead of rushing into the room, Zhongxian raised his eyebrows and scanned the room once more. A moment later, he frowned. He found that he couldn't peer into the contents of the coffin. Most probably, it was a creation beyond that of his current cultivation realm. I wonder if I can get any detail on the room from the ground. Even though the Eye of Insight was unable to provide him with any useful detail, Zhongxian didn't panic. Instead, he bent down and touched the ground. Previously, recalling how he'd opened the Celestial Designer mechanical container, Zhongxian thought that since the traps operated by a mechanical system as well, it should have a flaw. Thus, he gave it a try and to his delight, it really worked. The Library of Heaven's Path immediately reflected the name and flaws of the traps. After looking through, Zhongxian came to a realization. These traps were actually similar to formations. They had a life gate and death gate as well. Otherwise, how was anyone supposed to bypass these traps? Not only so, there was also a core as well. As long as one found the center of operations, no matter how powerful a trap was, it could be made redundant. After all, without energy, no matter how powerful a machine was, it would be useless. This was the reason why Zhongxian could stop the entire mechanical system with a kick and lead everyone in. Who? A book appeared in Zhongxian's mind. Green ash rock, naturally formed in the depths of the ground. It is resilient. With just a brief glance, Zhongxian nearly spurted blood. He thought that even though the Eye of Insight was ineffective, he should be able to find out something regarding the coffin or the hall via the Library of Heaven's Path. Never in his dreams did he expect for an analysis on the rock he just touched to appear instead. The passageway constitutes the entirety of the mechanical system. That's why information regarding the traps was reflected when I touched it. On the other hand, this is just a normal tile, so it reflects exactly what I touched. This is similar to the case when I touched the bookshelf back then. Dismal. Zhongxian soon understood. Back then, When Xianxia attempted to gather all of the books on a bookshelf in a single go by touching the bookshelf, a similar occurrence happened. It seemed like the Library of Heaven's Path classified matters by an entirety. Otherwise, it would only reflect what Xianxia came into direct physical contact with. But thinking about it, if he were able to know the condition of the entire continent just by touching the floor, that would be a little ridiculous. Seeing the serious expression on Xianxia's face, Luozhu took the lead and explained, "There's no danger here. We can enter the hall." When he stepped into the hall, nothing particular occurred. Thus, the group behind followed suit. "These are the coffins housing the soulless metal humanoids. The one that I took came from here." Walking up to the coffin, Luozhu pointed and spoke anxiously. Back then, it was precisely when he opened the coffin and was about to take away the soulless metal humanoid that he was possessed. As such, he already had a trauma regarding the matter, and thus, he didn't dare to step forward. "Let me take a look." Nodding his head, Xianxia walked forward. As expected, one of the 4 coffins was open, and its interior was completely empty. He touched the empty coffin. "Who?" A book appeared in the Library of Heaven's Path. Grade 7 metal coffin, forged by 4-star blacksmith Xianxia. It is used as a container to house a soulless metal humanoid, and it won't decompose over time. Flaw number 1, it cannot be used to house a normal corpse. The introduction and flaws regarding the coffin were detailed in the book. Grade 7 metal coffin. After reading through the details, Xianxia was perplexed. Based on the description in the Library of Heaven's Path, this coffin should only be used to store soulless metal humanoids. It shouldn't contain any souls at all. If so, why would Luozhu have been possessed? Thus, he turned to an unopened coffin and touched it. It was also a grade 7 metal coffin, and its purpose was the same as well, storing soulless metal humanoid. There wasn't much of a difference from the first one. Xianxia went on to touch the others and they reflected the same conclusion as well. Knowing that they were containers for soulless metal humanoid, Xianxia swiftly lost his interest. The purpose of his journey was to obtain the inheritance of the soul oracles. The soulless metal humanoids didn't mean much to him. But in the end, these items were of great value. Previously, Xianxia had managed to sell it for 20,000 spirit stones. Even though he didn't need it, he could still earn substantial wealth from their sales. Seeing as Xianxia touched all 4 of the coffins, Luozhu asked anxiously, "Xianxia, I was possessed here. Should we open the other coffins?" The others were also awaiting Xianxia's decision. "Don't open them first." Even though there were no problems reflected on the books, Xianxia couldn't guarantee that no mishap would occur when the coffins were opened. It would still be fine if a soul of the level of the one who possessed Luozhu previously appeared, but if a powerful were to appear instead, Xianxia could not say for sure whether his Heaven's Path Xianxia would be effective on the latter. It was better to proceed carefully. Put the coffins directly into the storage ring. We'll open them after we get out, Xianxia said after a moment of contemplation. "All right." Sun Qiong had been waiting for these words. He hurried forward, stretched out his hand, and swept the 4 giant coffins into his storage ring. "These belong to the young master. No matter who you are, don't even dream of laying your hands on them." Cough cough. Seeing how shameless Sun Qiong was behaving, Xianxia's face reddened. He turned around, issued some instructions, before proceeding ahead. "You all wait here first. I'll look around the area." The hall had an eerie appearance, and it felt desolate. The walls were all made of the tough green ash rocks. It seemed like the builder really put a lot of effort into building this hall. Not only did he excavate the entire area, he even used the toughest material to reinforce its structure, ensuring its long-term durability. Touching the walls around the room, Xianxia didn't find any traps. Thus, he advanced forward. The hall was linked to another narrow passageway. Walking up to it, he bent down and touched the ground. "Who?" A book appeared in the Library of Heaven's Path. "It's just an ordinary passageway." The book recorded the details of the floor material reflected in the book, thus proving that there weren't any mechanical traps inside. Heaving a sigh of relief, Xianxia soon came to a realization. Such traps were expensive. It was normal for traps to be laid at the entrance for fear of invaders, but setting them up in the interiors seemed a little ridiculous. Since the purpose of those traps was to prevent anyone to entering the tomb at all, it would make more sense to spend the money on reinforcing the traps in the entrance. He turned around and shouted, "There is no danger here, come over."
The group hurried over. Xianxia led the way forward.
The passageway wasn't long, extending on for only a distance of 10 meters or so. At the end, another vast hall appeared before them. It was much larger than the one before. Based on what I know, the first chamber is for the protectors of the Soul Oracle, the soulless metal humanoids, while the second chamber is the main chamber prepared for the Soul Oracle himself. This should be where the souls of the Soul Oracles lies.
Luo Zhu swallowed a mouthful of saliva.
You mean that we'll find the souls of the Soul Oracles here?
Xianxia asked. Luo Zhu nodded.
Since this is the main chamber.
I believe so.
Upon hearing the other party's confirmation, Xianxia raised his head, and with a glance, a deep frown suddenly appeared on his face.
This. What is going on?
Chapter 504. Second acknowledgement of the heavens instead of a hall. What that appeared before them was a field of flora and fauna. A refreshing fragrance tickled their nose, and in the skies, they saw white clouds floating by. It was as though they had returned back to the mountains.
Could this be an illusion formation?
Hall Master Sai and the others were taken aback. How could there be plants growing in an underground chamber? Not to mention white clouds and blue skies. Clearly, it was an illusion. The only explanation for this bizarre sight was that it was an illusion formation. This isn't a formation.
Xianxia shook his head.
As a formation master, he would surely be able to tell if it was one. However, there wasn't the slightest disturbance in the spiritual energy before him, and the sight before him felt incomparably real. It was as though one was traversing through space, and it felt indescribably bizarre.
Is this a mechanical trap?
No, that can't be. Mechanical traps aren't capable of producing such effects. In the end, mechanical traps operated based on logic. They weren't capable of producing these flora, fauna, and flowing water before them. Let me test the situation out with a puppet. Perplexed, Luo Zhu flicked his wrist and a puppet appeared. Then, the puppet slowly walked toward the field at the end of the passageway. As soon as it stepped out of the passageway, it immediately disappeared without a trace.
What happened?
Everyone leaped back in shock. How could the puppet simply disappear all of a sudden? Even if a mechanical trap was activated, at least the fragments of the puppets should remain. To disappear as soon as it walked toward the end of the passageway. This was way too bizarre. Could this be a teleportation formation? Hall Master Sai's throat went dry. Everyone turned to look at him doubtfully. The teleportation formation of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance is only capable of transferring words and information, and they are known as communication walls. Hall Master Sai said, with a trembling voice, it said that at grade 6, teleportation formation will gain the ability to transfer material objects such as food, money, equipment, and even artifacts. At grade 8, even life forms can be transported. In other words, even a human can leap through space. Transporting a human. The crowd was astonished. Xianxia also widened his eyes in shock. As a 4-star formation master, he had a deeper understanding of formations than Hall Master Sai. He thought that transporting information should already be the limit. To think that formations would be able to transport even a human. How deep of an understanding of space must one possess to be capable of setting up a formation capable of transporting humans? Given how the puppet abruptly disappeared, could this really be a formation of that level? If so, it was normal that they couldn't see or feel the puppet anymore. As an upper 9 paths occupation, formation masters had a high requisite on one's cultivation. If one's cultivation didn't reach the required level, one would be disallowed from studying more profound knowledge. It was just like how even though Xianxia was able to inscribe a grade 5 formation plate, he was only considered a quasi 4-star formation master. A person who was capable of setting up a grade 8 formation definitely possessed cultivation beyond that of a transcendent mortal. To be able to get such a figure to set up a formation for him, how powerful must the owner of the tomb be? Since Xianxia was able to come to this conclusion, the others also realized the same as well. Their faces immediately paled. If it was just a transcendent mortal 3-dan or 4-dan soul oracle, even if they were possessed, they would still possess a certain degree of self-preservation means. However, if the opponent they met were to be beyond that level, they wouldn't stand a chance at all. Xianxia, do we enter? The crowd turned to look at Xianxia. Xianxia fell into deep contemplation. If his conjecture was right, proceeding ahead would definitely put them in grave danger. He wasn't confident of holding his ground even with the heavens path Xianxia. It could be said that certain doom awaited them if they were to proceed forward. But if they backed down now, how much longer would it take for Lu Chong to recover? For me, he was willing to even risk his life. What do I have to fear? Recalling how that young man stepped in front of him calmly to protect him, determination gleamed in Xianxia's eyes. Lu Chong was willing to give up his life for him. As the other party's senior, if he were to back down in the face of danger, what rights did he have to be considered as the other party's teacher? Flinging his hands back, Xianxia instructed, "You all wait here, I'll go in alone. If I don't return in 4 hours, I'll have to trouble Hall Master Sai and Zhao Gongzi to help my students and Sun Qiong get out." "Teacher, I'm not leaving. I want to follow you." Zhao Ya stepped forward. "We share the same thoughts. We'll follow you no matter where you go." Yuan Dao and the others declared resolutely. If not for Zhong Laoshe, they would still be ordinary students in Qianxian Kingdom. However, at this moment, every single one of them was a Zhizuan realm expert, each possessing the strength to lift a mountain. Since their teacher was willing to put himself with danger to save Lu Chong, how could they, as his students, back down? Xianxia felt a surge of warmth. However, the situation before him was too bizarre. It was too dangerous to bring them over. After a moment of hesitation, Xianxia shook his head and his complexion darkened. "Are you all going to disobey my orders? Stay here. Teacher, we implore you to not chase us away. How can we possibly watch by the side as you put yourself into danger? Even if we were to survive this ordeal, we'd definitely be plagued by guilt in the future." Zhao Ya spoke resolutely. "Teacher, please don't chase us away. Even if it means disobeying your words, I'll go with you." Wang Ying said. She was usually the most indecisive one of the group, and yet, at this moment, the determination in her eyes was unwavering. Knowing that his students weren't able to simply watch on by the side as he ventured through danger, Xianxia eventually nodded his head after a long moment of contemplation. "Since you all have made up your minds, let's go together then. The teacher for the students, and the students for the teacher. This is what a true relationship between a teacher and student should be." Watching this sight, Zhao Feiwu and the others felt touched. Previously, they had been wondering why a person of Zhongshi's capability would choose to bring around a bunch of young and weak students along with him. However, at this moment, they realized that the relationship of a teacher and a student transcended far beyond the impartation of knowledge. A teacher could brave through danger for their students, whereas a student could remain unmoved before danger for their teacher. It was this self-sacrificial spirit that made the relationship between the two so noble. Hong Long. At that moment, a powerful aura suddenly descended from the skies. A unique energy began gathering in the world. It was neither spiritual energy nor origin energy, but with a single whiff, one could feel their analytical ability growing stronger and their thought process becoming clearer. This energy swiftly gathered around Xianxia as though a torrent, refining his presence and disposition. Narrowing her eyes, Zhao Feiwu suddenly thought of something and her lips trembled in disbelief. "It's Celestial Master Teacher." Jin Songhai was also taken aback. "Celestial Master Teacher? How is that possible?" Celestial Master Teacher meant that even the heavens were acknowledging one's identity as a Master Teacher. Even if one didn't undergo the various examinations of the Master Teachers, one could still be acknowledged by the masses. Despite the long history of the continent, only Kongsha had ever succeeded in being acknowledged by the heavens. To think that this Zhongsha would manage to achieve the same as well. Could this really be true? Indeed, It's really Celestial Master Teacher. Furthermore, it doesn't seem to be just 2-star. Hall Master Sai's face flushed red. As the head of the only appraiser hall in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, as well as a 4-star pinnacle appraiser, he had met with a lot of master teachers. However, he had never heard of a single one being acknowledged by the heavens. The other party had said that he was a 2-star master teacher, so even if the heavens were to acknowledge him, he should only be a 3-star celestial master teacher at maximum. However, the overwhelming energy before him actually made him feel like submitting to the other party. Without a doubt, the other party wasn't just a 2-star or 3-star master teacher. However, as for his exact rank, Hall Master Sai wasn't a master teacher and he had never seen a celestial master teacher before, so he couldn't make a clear gauge. But regardless of his rank, to be acknowledged by the heavens itself was already sufficient to send a ripple of shock through the world. This, contrary to the shock the others were going through, the current Xianxia was a little dumbstruck. Previously, when he agreed to Zhao Ya and the others' request, he actually wasn't too keen on doing so. However, considering that his students would never grow up if he were to protect them tightly beneath his wings, he decided to let go. It was just like a seedling. If one were to use a wall to shield it from rain and storm, it would never grow tall. Thus, he reluctantly agreed to it. However, he didn't expect this to induce another celestial master teacher acknowledgement. He had undergone such a situation before, so even though the inflow of the energy made him a little dizzy, he knew that this was a good chance for him to raise his strength. Thus, without any hesitation, he immediately sat down on the ground and focused his attention into absorbing the unique energy shrouding him. Hong Long. With the inflow of this strength, his soul depth raised swiftly. His thought process gradually became swifter and clearer. A meeting was taking place in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance's Master Teacher Pavilion. We are the hosts for the Master Teacher Tournament this time around. Make some preparations, we have to at least get a good placing. Seated at the center seat, Pavilion Master Kang surveyed the group before him. Those within the room were all elders of the Master Teacher Pavilion. Su Fan and Ling Yuheng were also within the group. The location for the Master Teacher Tournament wasn't fixed. The 27 powers would take turns hosting the event, and it only happened that Myriad Kingdom City would be playing host this time around. This time, they were going to be battling on their home ground. It would be truly embarrassing if their results were as poor as before. Yes. The crowd nodded their heads. This time, our elders have nominated a total of 6 candidates. I have looked through the information you all have submitted and they are indeed young talents. However, there are only 2 slots for this tournament, so a round of selection will have to be conducted. Pavilion Master Kang continued. However, before he could finish his words, his body suddenly froze. The other elders also noticed something and they narrowed their eyes. They quickly turned their sights toward a single direction. Trembling of myriad tokens, harmony of the chimes. This is acknowledgement of a celestial master teacher. After a long period of time, Pavilion Master Kang finally managed to utter with a hoarse voice. Even though it's an acknowledgement of celestial master teacher and it has occurred in our guild, given how the remarkable geniuses of the other powers are gathered in Myriad Kingdom City at the moment, there is a possibility that one of them might be the one who triggered it. Indeed, if they were to be acknowledged by the heavens in Myriad Kingdom City, the phenomenon would appear in our guild. Hurry up and find out which geniuses are in the city at the moment. It seems like the champion of this tournament will surely be that person. The faces of the elders paled, and they muttered to themselves. Celestial Master Teacher was an existence acknowledged by the heavens itself. In the entire continent, only Xianxia had managed to achieve this feat regardless of which power the Celestial Master Teacher came from. There was no doubt that he would be the champion in the Master Teacher Tournament. Could it be him? Different from the reaction of the other elders, Su Shur and Ling Shi glanced at one another and a figure suddenly appeared in their mind. But soon, they shook their heads. He had just completed by 2-star Master Teacher examination, and he hadn't even reached Jizuan realm yet. How could he possibly be acknowledged by the heavens? Thus, it couldn't be him. Chapter 505, Oasis of the Mirage Deity. After a long period of time, Xianxia finally finished absorbing the energy in his surroundings and stood up. as expected of celestial master teacher. Even though his cultivation realm remained the same, at the prolonged longevity realm pinnacle, his comprehension of cultivation and battle techniques had deepened. With just this, his fighting prowess could be said to have raised by at least twofold. If he could fight equally with a transcendent mortal 2 Dan intermediate stage previously, he would be able to match up with an advanced stage expert now. At the same time, his soul depth had also raised from 12.1 to 14.1. Even though an increase of 2.0 was humble as compared to the effects of the Book of Heaven's path, if he were to cultivate normally, this leap would require at least decades of effort. In other words, this acknowledgement of celestial master teacher had saved him at least decades of training for his soul depth. Fearsome. Also, his eye of insight and impartation of heavens will had also grown stronger. Using the eye of insight, he could now peer through existence's 2 small cultivation tiers above him. Meaning, he could easily see through the flaws of an origin energy realm intermediate stage cultivator already. As for impartation of heaven's will, his ability to induce trust in others had grown, and others would find it hard to refute his words. He had to expend his soul depth to coax Song Chao previously, but now, as long as he were to utilize the impartation of heaven's will, the other party would feel inclined to trust his words automatically. More importantly, by earning the acknowledge of the heavens, his will of mind had also progressed significantly in the lucid analytical realm. As expected of celestial master teacher. Its effects were truly immense to a master teacher. Even though there was no change in my cultivation, I can feel that I'm not too far from making a breakthrough. With a deeper understanding of cultivation, it wasn't too difficult for him to bypass the barriers to reaching origin energy realm. After all, he had studied a few hundred origin energy realm secret manuals. Even though he hadn't compiled a flawless version of Heaven's Path divine art yet, he had a clear idea on the direction of his cultivation. As long as he had sufficient spirit stones, making a breakthrough wasn't too difficult. I should try to look at the field of grass before me once more with the eye of insight. Thinking that he might see something new with his improved eye of insight, Xianxia lifted his gaze. It isn't a formation or a mechanical trap. There was a huge disparity between what he could see before and what he was seeing now. The previous obscurity had become crystal clear to Xianxia's eyes. Did Xianxia notice something? The crowd turned their gazes over. They had never seen a celestial master teacher before, but as a legend of the master teacher pavilion, they knew that it was anything but ordinary. It is a method used by soul oracles to beguile souls. In other words, what you all are seeing is fake, a mirage, said Xianxia, frowning. But if it's a mirage, why did the puppets suddenly disappear? Luo Zhu found the matter hard to believe. At most, a mirage should only be able to confuse one. This explanation couldn't account for the disappearance of the puppet. The puppet had disappeared right after walking through the passageway. It was clear that some powerful formation had transported it away. Soul oracles have the ability to beguile all life forms possessing souls. They can make us all see the same image, and thus, inducing us to believe that what that lay before us is real. However, puppets are different. Puppets have no soul and consciousness, and as such, they can't be beguiled. Thus, it's not that the puppet disappeared but that it has stepped through the passageway. Since it is unable to enter the mirage, naturally, we can't see it, Xianxia explained. Soul oracles could beguile life forms possessing souls and muddle their ability to distinguish truth from false. However, puppets were different. Possessing no consciousness, they couldn't be beguiled and naturally, they would step right through the mirage. If it's true, then could this be the soul oracles? Oasis of the mirage deity. Suddenly recalling something, Luo Zhu's face paled and he nearly fell to the ground. Oasis of the mirage deity. Everyone was baffled. Even the knowledgeable Hall Master Sai was confused. Oasis of the mirage deity is a skill unique to soul oracles. They are capable of using their soul energy to create an incomparably realistic sight that subconsciously draws one in, similar to the oasis in the desert. The moment one steps into the mirage, one's soul will be forcefully torn from one's body and come under the control of the soul oracle. Luo Zhu trembled as he explained. One's soul will be forcefully torn from one's body. Everyone was shocked. The greatest weakness of the soul oracles was their physical body. Once one lost this advantage over them, wouldn't one be powerless to their whims? Indeed. If we had entered just now, our souls would be torn from our body. Even if we managed to survive, we would be as good as dead. Cold sweat seeped down Luo Zhu's head. The faces of the others also paled. It was fortunate that they didn't charge ahead upon realizing the peculiarity of the matter. If they had really rushed over, they would have died for nothing. As expected of a soul oracle. Even their means were hard to guard against. Just that, one has to be at least 6-star to be capable of utilizing the oasis of the Mirage deity. Could this be the tomb of a 6-star soul oracle? Luo Zhu asked doubtfully. Oasis of the Mirage deity wasn't a skill that just any soul oracle could utilize. Only upon reaching 6-star would one be able to set it up. Just like master teachers and other upper 9 paths occupation, the techniques of the soul oracles also had a requisite on one's cultivation. As such, the ranking of a soul oracle was also linked to his cultivation realm. A 6-star soul oracle would possess a cultivation realm at the zenith of the transcendent mortal realm. Even if it was lacking a physical body, it wasn't an opponent that they could face. I think that it would be best if we leave right now. Hall Master Sai's eyebrows leaped in unease. Even though he was interested in seeing the tomb of a soul oracle and view the various artifacts contained within, he didn't have the courage to disturb the tomb of a former 6-star soul oracle. Jin Songhai clenched his fists tightly and said, "Indeed. It's best for us to not get involved with an expert of this level." The more knowledgeable one was, the more one understood one's own ignorance. Similarly, the higher one's cultivation realm was, the more they understood how powerful the top-notch experts were. Understanding the irreconcilable gap between them and a person who once stood at the zenith of transcendent mortals, they didn't dare to proceed any further. They knew that with their force, they would never be able to deal with a 6-star soul oracle, no matter how many years he had been dead for. Leave? That's a good idea. Lifting his head, Xianxia smiled bitterly, but it's already too late. He. At that moment, everyone suddenly felt a chill and a sinister laughter echoed in the passageway. To think that my oasis of the Mirage deity would be seen through so easily. Not bad, it seems that quite a few bodies have come this time. The voice was bizarrely shrill, and it seemed to echo straight within the depths of one's soul, leaving one feeling unnerved. Huala! In an instant, the flowers, clouds, and blue sky before them disappeared, and a huge, empty hall appeared in its place. In the large hall, there was only a single coffin placed at a distance 40 to 50 meters away from the crowd. It was hard to tell how large it was from this distance, but from the looks of it, it was significantly bigger and heavier than the other 4 coffins in the first chamber. You wish to possess us? Xianxia narrowed his eyes. Entering the lucid analytical realm, Xianxia felt no anxiety, fear, or any negative emotions. After such a long sleep, since someone dared to stumble into my tomb, of course I should claim their bodies for my own use. The voice chuckled. As the other party spoke, Xianxia scanned his surroundings with his eye of insight. Regardless of how powerful the other party was, he had already been dead for innumerable years. Given how he would rather resort to using a mirage than deal with them personally, it could only mean that he wasn't as powerful as they thought he was. As long as Xianxia found his hiding spot, there might be a chance to turn the situation around. However, to his disappointment, he couldn't find any trace of the other party at all. Don't waste your effort. If I don't want to appear, do you think that you can find me with your mediocre skills? Seemingly noticing Xianxia's intentions, the voice sounded once more. Xianxia fell silent. The voice was transmitted straight into their soul, making it impossible to trace him via sound. It would indeed be difficult to find him so long as he wished to remain hidden. Turning around to glance at Jin Songhai and Hall Master Sai, the duo also shook their heads. It seemed like the two of them had the same idea in mind as well. Just as Xianxia was racking his brain for a solution, Jin Songhai's voice sounded. Xianxia, I'll try to stall for time. You should take the chance to leave with Gongzi and the others. Turning his head, he saw that Jin Songhai's eyes were filled with the determination of a soldier ready to meet his demise. You have an idea in mind. Xianxia sent a telepathic message. I don't. However, I do have a few poisons that work on souls, so it might be effective against him. Jin Songhai replied grimly. The effects on poison weren't just limited to the physical body. Some of the more formidable poison could dissipate souls as well. Taking Zhong Xian's innate fetal poison for example, it was planted in him while he was still a fetus. Given the nearly absolute nature of the poison, it was, in a sense, more fearsome than a soul-dissipating poison. You wish to poison me? Ha ha ha, you should try to find me first. In the midst of the discussion of the duo, the voice sounded once more. You can listen to telepathic messages. Zhong Xian widened his eyes in astonishment. They had communicated previously using telepathy, and only the two of them should know of the content of their words. Even Hall Master Sai, who was standing by the side, was completely oblivious to their interaction. Yet, this fellow actually could tell that Jin Songhai intended to poison him. That was way too fearsome. Ha! It isn't just your telepathic message. Via your souls, I can even tell what you all are thinking. Harumphing coldly, the voice continued, I advise you all not to make any futile struggles. Even though there is no danger lying in wait in the passageway, it can be locked down. While you all were beguiled by the oasis of the Mirage deity, I locked down the area. It's too late for you to be thinking of leaving. Hearing those words, everyone turned their heads around and their faces immediately paled. Just as the other party had said, the passageway behind had been sealed tightly by a stone wall. Let me give it a try. With an awful complexion, Jin Songhai gathered his strength and struck the stone wall heavily. Hong long. There was a massive tremor. However, the stone wall seemed to have been protected by something powerful. Even the strength of a transcendent mortal 4 Dan was unable to move it, needless to say, shatter it. Let me give it a try as well. Stepping forward, Hall Master Sai took out a saber and slashed the stone wall several times. However, just like Jin Songhai, he didn't leave the slightest damage on the wall. This is the dragon severing lock set up by a 6-star celestial designer. Only those who harness the strength of a transcendent mortal 9 Dan cultivator can break it. You only have 2 fates before you. You will either meet your death here, or you will end up serving as my body. The voice chuckled. Dragon severing lock. Everyone's complexion became extremely awful. Advancing and retreating weren't an option for them. Were they really going to die like that? Chapter 506. Let me start with 1,000 books. The dragon severing lock is usually the final line of defense used for a fortress. It's designed such that one would be unable to break it unless one's cultivation reaches the required level. Even the celestial designer who set up the trap himself would find it hard to open it. Hall Master Sai's complexion darkened. This was the final resort of celestial designers, similar to how a cultivator self-destructs when forced into a corner. Unless the circumstances were dire, no one would go to such an extent. Usually, it was only to block out one's enemies or to die along with one's nemesis that such a trap would be activated. The moment it fell, there was no way to undo it. Even dragons would be unable to enter, thus the name dragon severing. Unless one's strength surpassed the tolerance limit of the wall, one wouldn't be able to break it. In this case, it was transcendent mortal 9 Dan. Otherwise, it was futile. Then, doesn't that mean that we can't leave? Even the strongest of them was only a transcendent mortal 4 Dan. Under such circumstances, wouldn't they be locked down forever? If they couldn't even break the wall, how could they leave the area? Let me take a look. Frowning, Zhong Xian walked up to the stone door, touched it with his finger, and a book appeared in the Library of Heaven's Path. Grade 6 Dragon Severing Lock, designed and crafted by 6-star celestial designer Xianxia. It is crafted from a unique material, making it extremely resilient. Flaws number 1, the crafting method. After reading through the book, Zhong Xian's face turned extremely awful. Even though Dragon Severing Lock had its flaws, it wasn't something that someone of his level of strength could exploit. In other words, what the other party said was true. No one of strength below transcendent mortal 9 Dan could break this wall. What should he do? Were they really going to be trapped here until their death? Just as Zhong Xian was ransacking his mind for a solution, Zhao Feiwu's voice echoed, "There's no need to worry. Since he intends to possess one of us, there must be another escape route. Otherwise, how does he intend to get out? That's right. Everyone was stunned for a moment before their eyes lit up. Since this fellow was going to possess one of them, he must have an escape route ready for himself. After all, how could he plunge himself into this kind of desperate situation? We can find a way to leave after we deal with this fellow. Our most imminent danger isn't regarding our confinement, Xianxia said. Even if they couldn't get out, the rations in their storage rings were sufficient to sustain everyone here for several years. Factoring in the spirit stones they had on top of that, it should be impossible for them to die out of natural causes within the short term. Currently, the greatest threat they were facing was the owner of the tomb. If they didn't find and eradicate the hidden soul oracle, they would surely be unable to get out of here alive. Hearing Xianxia's words, the voice harumphed coldly. Deal with me? Are you sure you have the capability to do so? Regardless of whether we do or not, we still have to give it a try. Stepping forward, Jin Songhai flicked his wrist and took out a jade bottle. Then, he carefully surveyed the surroundings, as though trying to find the other party's location. Give it a try. Let me show you how laughable that idea is then. Woo! After that, a ray of light suddenly shot across the hall. Before Jin Songhai could react, he was struck squarely on his chest. Pu! He flew all the way back and crashed heavily against the wall. Huge mouthfuls of blood gushed from him. Elder Jin. Not expecting that the strongest member, Jin Songhai, would be defeated in a single move, everyone clenched their fists tightly. To be capable of subduing a transcendent mortal 4-dan in an instant, even if the other party wasn't a 6-star soul oracle, he still wasn't someone that they could deal with. Even though Jin Songhai was injured, Xianxia didn't panic. Rather, he made use of this opportunity to quickly glance at the direction where the light appeared from. Wang! A book appeared in the Library of Heaven's Path. Xianxia hurriedly flipped it open and read through it. It's an attack from a mechanical trap. Xianxia frowned. The previous attack didn't come from the soul oracle but a mechanical trap. In other words, it was impossible for him to locate the other party from the previous attack. It's impossible for the soul oracle to show any opening that would betray his location. Otherwise, we would be able to guard against him and hinder his possession. Upon seeing Xianxia's action, Luozhu immediately sent a telepathic message over. That's true. Xianxia nodded his agreement. When a soul oracle possessed the body of another, they would enter via one's acupoints. If one were to seal the acupoint in advance and repel the soul oracle, it would become extremely difficult for the soul oracle to succeed. After all, what the soul oracle was doing was expelling the original soul of the body and forcefully fusing their soul with the body. If the original owner were to struggle violently, it might cause irreparable damage to the body. If so, it would be meaningless even if the soul oracle successfully possessed the body. This was the reason why that fellow would not allow himself to be noticed until he struck. Besides, it was also possible that a member of the group might have some specialized equipment to deal with souls. This would put him at risk. Don't even think of finding me. It's impossible for you all to kill me, you're all still too weak. Hearing the telepathic conversation between the duo, the voice continued haughtily, since you have entered my tomb, you should have been prepared to be possessed. However, I can only possess one of you, so the rest will be safe. Safe? Ha, like it would be that simple. Hall Master Sai harumphed. Given how the other party locked all of them in this chamber, how could it be so simple? He didn't believe that the other fellow would allow any of them to leave after successfully possessing one body. After all, soul oracles were a forbidden existence. If news that one had possessed the body of another were to get out, that person would surely be pursued to the ends of the world. By safe, I meant that you won't have to die for the time being. As for how long you can live for, it'll depend on your choice. The voice chuckled. Choice? Xianxia frowned. The voice said, indeed. I'll give you all 2 choices now. I have a total of 3 trials here. If you can clear the trials, I will consider sparing you. However, you still won't be allowed to leave. I will leave you here to do whatever you need to survive. Trial. Everyone was taken aback. Wasn't this fellow going to possess them? What in the world were the trials for then? Xianxia was also perplexed. Usually, trials would only be prepared for the various examinations for master teachers and the other unique occupations. Given how powerful the other party was, killing them should be a walk in the park. What was the point of going through so much trouble? However, given that they were stuck now and that the other party had control over the mechanical traps, their life and death were in the hands of the other party. No matter how bewildered they weren't in the position to reject the other party's conditions. What about the alternative option? Xianxia asked. The other option is that I'll kill you all one by one until someone is willing to challenge the trial. The voice harumphed. Not expecting the second condition to be about the trial as well, the crowd felt even more baffled. What was this fellow's motive for insisting for them to challenge the trial? Could this be selection of the reception lamb? Luo Zhu suddenly asked. Selection of the reception lamb. Xianxia's mouth twitched. Selection of the reception lamb was a term commonly used by herders. Usually, when a guest visited, a herder would slaughter a lamb to welcome him. However, how to choose the most suitable lamb to welcome the guest warmly was a problem. Thus, they would allow the lamb to run on the fields. The one that ran the fastest and most happily would surely have the best meat texture. Could the Soul Oracle be intending to do the same as well? Through the trials, he would choose the one possessing the most suitable physical constitution to possess. This way, his soul could better fuse with the body and the decline of his cultivation would be minimized. That's very possible. Contemplating over the issue for a moment, Xianxia nodded his head in agreement. There was a high possibility that this was the case. Which body to possess was also an important choice for a soul oracle as well. Taking that soul which possessed Luo Zhu previously, not only did his cultivation plummet, it would also be very difficult for him to successfully fuse with the body. Even if he were to succeed, due to the incompatible constitution, his future achievements would have been limited as well. Making an analogy, it was just like forcing a person adept in swordsmanship to use a hammer instead. No matter how good a physical body was, as long as it was incompatible, one would be unable to bring out its full strength. It was highly possible that that fellow was harboring such thoughts when asking them to challenge the trials. Through the selection, he would find the most suitable constitution for him to possess. Otherwise, how could an ancient soul be so bored as to seal the chamber using the dragon severing lock just to fool around with them? Most probably, he had already decided on this from the moment the group entered the tomb. The main reason why he didn't make any move earlier was to wait until they entered this passageway so as to seal their escape route. Only then did he finally reveal his existence. That's right, I'm indeed choosing the finest lamb among you lot. Why, are you afraid? Hearing their conversation, the voice sounded once more. Afraid? Why would we be? Shaking his head, Xianxia said. Where is your trial? Bring it out so that we can take a look. That's more like it. Seeing Xianxia agree to the matter, the voice sounded a little pleased. Don't think that I won't lay my eyes on you just because you failed the trial. My selection criterion is your constitution, not the speed and means you use to clear the trial. Remember this, only those who pass the trial will not be killed. Those who fail, regretfully, you'll have to bid everyone else farewell. Hong Long. The ground tremored and a massive stone tablet appeared in the center of the hall. This is the most basic soul-guiding formula of the soul oracles. Study it, and within 10 days, you must be able to draw your soul out of your body to clear the trial. Otherwise, the traps will eliminate you immediately. The voice instructed impassively. Soul-guiding formula. Looking at the stone tablet, Xianxia saw a dense congregation of words on it. The 3 large words inscribed at the very top seemed to pierce straight into one's soul, jolting one's consciousness. Soul-guiding formula. The cultivation technique of soul oracles. To think that the first trial would be learning a cultivation technique. It seems like this fellow is trying to find one with a constitution compatible with the arts of soul oracles. Xianxia came to a realization. Indeed, being capable of executing the soul-guiding formula would mean that one is compatible with the arts of soul oracle. Possessing a body with such constitution, the other party would be able to resume his cultivation and return to his pinnacle state. One who was adept at swordsmanship would naturally wish to possess a swordmaster. With a constitution suited for sword arts, it would be easier for him to relearn his techniques. As a soul oracle, the other party definitely wished to find someone capable of learning soul oracle cultivation techniques. It would be much easier for him to cultivate this way. Don't bother trying your luck and waiting until the last day before drawing your soul out. It is completely pointless. Whether one has talent in soul oracle arts doesn't depend on how fast one grasps the soul guiding method. Besides, once you start learning the soul guiding method, you won't have a choice in the matter. Afraid that the group wouldn't put their effort into learning the soul guiding method, the voice added. However, before he could finish his words, the impassive voice of a young man voice said, "This soul guiding method seems not bad. Do you have any other similar cultivation techniques to this? The more there are, the better. Why don't you bring out 1,000 books for me to browse through first?" The voice was taken aback. 1,000 books. Chapter 507, Heaven's Path Soul Art. Not only was the voice stumped, even Hall Master Sai and the others were stunned, and they nearly spurted blood. Bring out 1,000 books for you to browse through first. Why did it feel less like a trial and more like ordering dishes in a restaurant instead? I don't know whether the food will be delicious or not, so I'll take a serving first. The soul guiding formula is the foundation art of soul oracles. There is only one formula and cultivation technique manual. After a moment of silence, the soul oracle hiding in the darkness finally harumphed coldly. It is the only one. Xianxia frowned. That's right. All soul oracles cultivate via this method, there are no other alternatives. After which, the voice continued, begin cultivating now. You will only be considered to have cleared the trial if you draw out your soul within 10 days. All right. Knowing that there should be no other traps involved since the other party was conducting a trial, the group walked out from the passageway toward the stone tablet. Xianxia had no idea who inscribed the tablet, but it had a bizarre beauty to it. Just by looking at the characters, one would feel tranquil. He's probably really a 6-star soul oracle. This was already equivalent to a 5th-level painting. Most probably, the soul oracle who inscribed the stone tablet had a deep understanding into the study of souls. There was a high chance that what Luo Zhu said was true. The fellow who was speaking to them from the dark was a 6-star soul oracle. He lightly brushed his finger over the stone tablet. Who? A corresponding book appeared in the library of Heaven's Path. Soul Guiding Formula, the foundation art of soul oracles. Created by the first soul oracle, Liu Mozi, it can separate one's soul from one's physical body. Flaws. Written on the first page was an introduction to the soul guiding formula, followed by the flaws. There's only 10 flaws, that's not too bad. Casually flipping through it, Xianxia realized that there were only 10 flaws in the cultivation technique. Most of the cultivation techniques that Xianxia seen before had from a few hundred to more than 1,000 flaws. This showed that throughout the course of the inheritance of the soul guiding formula, it had been refined continuously and it was gradually approaching perfection. It was no wonder that this fellow said there was only a set of foundation formula. It was already incredible that there could be such a cultivation technique like this that was so close to perfection. For a second one like this to appear was nearly impossible. There was only a single Heaven's Path, and the fewer mistakes there were, the closer one was to the truth. It was hard to find another one different from it. Let me see what flaws are there first. Xianxia lowered his head to take a look. Number 1. Upon successfully mastering the formula, one's cultivation will be conjoined onto one's soul, turning one's physical body into an empty shell. On top of that, the compatibility between one's soul and body will deteriorate. Even though one will look no different from a normal person, one would be actually driving the body using one's soul. After reading the first flaw, Xianxia's complexion turned awful. Going by what was said above, if he were to successfully draw his soul out, it would be equivalent to tearing his soul and body apart. Even if he were to continue driving his own body, it would be, in truth, no different from driving a puppet. Other than the soul oracle cultivation technique, he would be unable to cultivate any other normal cultivation technique. It was just like driving a car. After mastering the soul guiding technique, one's physical body would become the car, whereas one's soul would become the driver. No matter how good one's driving skill was, it was impossible to reach the same level of control as moving one's own body. In other words, once he successfully draws out his soul, it would be equivalent to giving up on his own physical body and his past cultivation. In the future, even if he could live on for an eternity through possessing others, he would also become an unnatural being that had to live in the shadows. Xianxia was originally thinking of learning the techniques of the occupation, but after reading that first flaw, he immediately lost his interest.
Browsing on.
Soon, he finished looking through all 10 of the flaws and gained a perfect understanding of the soul guiding formula. If I cultivate according to this formula and succeed, I'll become a monster. But if I don't, there's a high chance I might be killed by that fellow. Xianxia frowned previously. As he didn't understand soul oracles, he didn't think much of them. However, after knowing that the cultivation method was filled with such fatal flaws, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Putting aside how his Heaven's Path divine art was paralleled and he would stand the top of the world as long as he cultivates accordingly, just the fact that his soul and body would be separate entities, making him no different from a monster, was already something he wished not. Besides, he was afflicted with the innate fetal poison. As long as he didn't reach the level of a 9-star master teacher by 30, even if he were to become just a soul, he would still die. The innate fetal poison was something that even Xianxia was unable to find a solution for. If becoming a soul oracle could really fix that problem, the latter wouldn't have had to go to the extent of diving into the deep oceans, stepping onto the treacherous plains, and entering into underground chambers, putting himself in so much danger just to raise his cultivation swiftly. This technique shouldn't be cultivated, but I don't have a choice right now. The person hiding in the dark was at least a 6-star soul oracle, a being far beyond their means. Besides, even if they had sufficient strength to deal with him, the other party could still easily kill them via the mechanical traps installed all around the hall. If he cultivated the soul guiding formula, it would be impossible for him to remain as a master teacher, and by 30-year-old, the innate fetal poison would take effect and he would die. But if he didn't cultivate, he would be killed by the other party. It was certain doom regardless of whether he did it or not. He felt so frustrated that his head was aching. If I find a way to improve the soul guiding formula so that the soul and body are separate and fuse back perfectly together, won't the problem be solved? After contemplating for a moment, Xianxia's eyes lit up and a thought popped into his head. There were flaws in this soul guiding art, but as long as he filled up the gaps and created a perfect Heaven's Path cultivation technique, wouldn't he be able to cultivate it without incurring such problems? Heaven's Path cultivation techniques were perfect. As long as he could compile one out, he wouldn't face the problem of an incompatibility between his soul and body after drawing his soul out. But where can I find additional soul oracle cultivation techniques to make up for those flaws?
Xianxia frowned.
Soul oracle cultivation techniques were mainly centered around will and soul. The cultivation technique manuals that Xianxia had collected before were all revolving around physical body and Xianxia. They were both very different things, and he wouldn't be able to form a Heaven's Path cultivation technique even if he were to put it together. Only by finding more soul oracle cultivation techniques would he be able to perfect the soul guiding formula. But the lineage of the soul oracles had already disappeared for innumerable years, and the fellow hiding in the dark didn't have any more of such manuals. Just as Xianxia was in dilemma, a thought suddenly struck him and he slapped his forehead. Why do I have to look for soul oracle cultivation techniques? Actually, wouldn't cultivation techniques that are beneficial to the soul work as well? He had been going down the wrong path previously. In the end, soul oracles were just individuals who learned a unique soul-related cultivation technique. Their aim was to gain the ability to transfuse their soul into another individual and possess their body to achieve the goal of immortality. Even though Xianxia was unable to find any soul oracle cultivation techniques, he had a bunch of soul cultivation techniques in his arsenal. In his journey from Xianxia Kingdom, all the libraries that he visited would have several books concerning the psyche and the soul. Even though they were foundation manuals, and there wasn't much benefit from cultivating them, he had a huge mountain of them. These manuals were useless to him previously, but if he were to compile them along with this soul-guiding art, what would happen? With fiery eyes, Xianxia chuckled lightly as he willed. Soul Cultivation Technique and Psyche Cultivation Technique Manuals. Voila! All of the related books immediately appeared before Xianxia. There was a huge quantity of them, and placed side by side, they could easily fill up 10 of the humongous bookshelves within the library of Heaven's Path. Making a rough estimation, there were at least a few dozen thousand of them. The psyche and the soul were also important to a cultivator, and as such, there were quite a lot of cultivation techniques on them as well. However, they were much cruder compared to the soul guiding formula. Most of them were about putting one through hardship so as to build one's mental fortitude. Compile. Xianxia muttered. Hula. The several dozen thousand books immediately fused together to form a single book. Xianxia hurriedly grabbed it and opened it up. The soul of a human is incomparably profound and mystical. It can be cultivated along with one's body, and it can also be drawn out individually. The body and the soul are two separate entities, and yet, they form a single whole. A new cultivation method was detailed in the book. Swiftly looking through it, Xianxia's breathing hastened and his eyes gleamed in excitement. As expected, there were no flaws. A Heaven's Path cultivation technique. Compiling the Soul Oracle's soul guiding formula along with the psyche and soul cultivation techniques of ordinary cultivators would actually create a perfect cultivation technique. The issue of incompatibility between one's soul and body would become non-existent. In other words, cultivating this technique, one could become a soul oracle. However, one wouldn't be bound by the limitations of soul oracles. One's soul would still be able to fuse perfectly with one's body, and one would still be able to cultivate like an ordinary cultivator. All of the flaws from before had been perfectly solved. Great. Time to cultivate. Even though it sounded complicated, all of this only happened in a few breaths. After swiftly memorizing the soul guiding formula, Xianxia gathered his concentration and started to cultivate. The energy in his body flurried as he gradually drew his soul out from his body. Heaven's Path soul art was just a technique to draw one's soul out from one's body. There was no need to absorb spiritual energy or utilize external tools such as spirit stones or that sort. As such, its cultivation was exceedingly easy. Jeji. Jeji. It felt as though he was forcing something out from his body, and yet at the same time, it felt as though he was leaping off a tall cliff. For a moment, he seemed to have lost control of himself. Wang. The world before him immediately changed. When Xianxia finally regained his composure, he saw another him standing quietly before him. On the other hand, he was floating lightly in the air. His soul had successfully left his body. As expected of a Heaven's Path cultivation technique. It didn't take him too long to successfully cultivate the Heaven's Path soul art. Looking around the surroundings, Xianxia tried to see if he could sense the soul oracle's presence, but to no avail. It seemed like that fellow was hiding in a secure location. Otherwise, it was impossible for even the eye of insight to be unable to detect him. Who? He returned to his body. His vision suddenly turned dark and he staggered. Even though his soul didn't leave his body for too long, he still felt extreme fatigue. Only after circulating his Heaven's Path Xianxia around his body did he recover slightly. Opening his eyes once more, he saw Zhao Wei and the others gathering around him with worried eyes. Teacher, are you all right? They had just barely finished reading through the soul guiding formula, and before they had the time to fully comprehend the essence of it, they saw their teacher stumble, so they immediately rushed forward worriedly. I'm fine. Xianxia chuckled. However, a doubt suddenly rose in his mind. When his soul left his body previously, that soul oracle should have noticed something. If so, why wasn't he reacting? Could it be that a soul drawn using the Heaven's Path soul art was different from that of a soul oracle's? That's why he didn't notice anything? Let me give it a try. Xianxia's eyes gleamed and the edges of his lips curled up. Facing the crowd, he waved his hands. Everyone, don't cultivate the technique first. I've looked through the formula and I realized that it's impossible for one to successfully draw out one's soul using this. I think he's trying to dupe us by giving us a bogus cultivation technique. Bogus cultivation technique? Ridiculous. Hearing those words, a cold voice boomed across the hall. Chapter 508, I can teach you. The crowd didn't expect Xianxia to say such words, and they were perplexed.
Ridiculous.
Xianxia shook his head. Look at this verse: diffusing the zhenqi throughout one's body into the various acupoints to augment the materialization of the soul. Under normal circumstances, a cultivator would gather the zhenqi from the acupoints into the dantian so as to store, accumulate, and utilize it. However, this verse is telling one to dissipate their zhenqi. That's no different from crippling one's own cultivation. If one were to really do so, how are they to advance their cultivation in the future? Even if they were originally powerful, if they were to cultivate using this formula, they would only grow weaker and weaker.
Everyone was stunned.
It was normal for zhenqi to flow to and fro from the acupoint and dantian. Only through this would a cultivator's body and soul be nourished and grow stronger. But why did Xianxia speak as though it was crippling one's cultivation?
Now that you speak of it,
it does seem a bit like crippling one's cultivation. After a moment of silence, Hall Master Sai finally spoke up. Even though it was normal for one to diffuse one's zhenqi across the acupoints in his body, if one were to do it at a rapid rate, it would be the method to crippling one's cultivation.
My words aren't wrong, are they?
Seeing that someone was agreeing with him, Xianxia nodded his head in satisfaction. You are trying to have us slowly dissipate our own cultivation so as to get rid of us in one go. The Library of Heaven's Path detailed the various flaws of the soul-guiding formula. All Xianxia had to do was to state a few.
That voice harumphed.
Nonsense. Only by diffusing one's zhenqi to the various acupoints will one be able to protect one's soul with zhenqi so that it can exist out of the body. Otherwise, given how none of you have reached consonant spirit realm, your souls won't be able to move around independently considering how limited your soul energy is. Upon reaching transcendent mortal 5-dan consonant spirit realm, one's soul energy would be significantly boosted, allowing even an ordinary cultivator to be able to draw his soul out of his body. However, given that their cultivation didn't allow for it yet, they could only guard their own souls with zhenqi. Why did the other party speak as though it was a cultivation crippling technique?
Protecting one's soul with zhenqi? You sure know how to phrase your words.
Fine, let me ask you then. What does one's zhenqi gushing out of the Huishan acupoint mean? The Huishan acupoint is the area where one's spirit is concentrated. If zhenqi were to gush out of this area, it could potentially result in death. If I'm not mistaken, if one were to cultivate using this formula, even if one manages to draw one's soul out of one's body would suffer tremendous damage or even die.
Xianxia said.
The voice fell silent. One of the most important aspects of drawing one's soul out of one's body was the death of one's physical body. Only then would one's soul be free from its physical restraint to wander around freely. But of course, as long as the soul were to return to the physical body, one's heartbeat would resume and one would be resurrected. Not allowing the other party to continue speaking, Xianxia harumphed and continued. Taking me for example, with my cultivation of transcendent mortal 1-dan, even if I were to successfully draw my soul out, the compatibility between my body and soul would deteriorate. If I'm not mistaken, to sustain my appearance as an ordinary human on the surface, I would have to consume pills every day. Am I right? Even if it was just a temporary separation between one's body and soul, after the body experienced a temporary state of pseudo-death, the compatibility between one's body and soul would deteriorate. Without pills to sustain oneself, it was just a matter of time before one's bodily functions deteriorated, and death marks started appearing on one's body. It was just like how organ transplants in his previous life worked. Once one donated one's own organ, even if one were to receive it back, one's own body would still reject it. Without medicine to sustain oneself, it would just be a matter of time before it was spoiled.
How did you know?
The voice was stunned. This was a secret among soul oracles, and they made sure never to let outsiders learn of it. How in the world did this young man learn of it? It doesn't matter whether how I learned of it. While it's true that reaching consonant spirit realm can help to alleviate the damage caused by the soul-guiding formula, even for one as strong as you, do you dare to walk in the midst of a storm?
Xianxia continued.
The voice quivered. Souls were of yin attribute, whereas lightning was a highly yang attribute natural phenomenon. Even if a soul oracle was hiding within a body, they would still have to retreat before lightning. They would no longer be able to live life as an ordinary human. Similar to the issue of one being rejected by his own body, this was a highly guarded secret of soul oracles. For that fellow to deduce so much with just a glance at the soul-guiding formula. Are you for real? Knowing that it was impossible for the flaws recorded in the library of Heaven's Path to be wrong, Xianxia chuckled. Placing his hands behind his back, he walked up to the tablet and spoke slowly. Putting aside lightning, let's talk about the onset of the night, a daily occurrence. Every day, at Z hour, when the yin energy is the most concentrated, when yin energy seeps into your body, do you feel an unbearable itch plaguing you, and only by drawing one's soul out is the itch alleviated? Soul oracles don't rely on a physical body for their strength. So what if one's physical body is in discomfort? As long as one's soul remains fine, that isn't a trouble at all. Stumped once more, the voice harumphed coldly. You're right. The soul oracle's greatest strength is their soul. Even if their physical body is ruined, it isn't a huge deal for them. They can simply possess another one and through such, live on in perpetuity. However, without the protection of a physical body, can you really survive the 5 soul declines? Lifting his fingers, Xianxia named possession decline, senescence decline, combat decline, searing yang decline, and the most fearsome of all, sense decline. You actually know of the 5 soul declines. The voice was no longer able to retain its calmness. Possession decline refers to the natural decline of strength when possessing the body of another. Even at minimum, it would cause a drop of 2 whole cultivation realms. As such, unless truly required, a soul oracle won't possess anybody. Senescence decline refers to the irreconcilable conflict between one's soul and physical body. This will cause one's soul to slowly deteriorate with time. In order to maintain one's strength, one can only continue cultivating frenziedly. Combat decline refers to how one's cultivation would decline when using soul energy to fight. As such, what soul oracles specialize in is beguiling souls and creating fearsome mirages. In truth, soul oracles rarely fight squarely. Searing yang decline. Just as said before, soul oracles don't dare to come into contact with elements that are rich in yang energy. Just by coming into proximity with such objects can cause your soul to weaken. While the first 4 declines are troublesome, they are still avoidable. What is the most fearsome of them all is the 5th one. Senses decline. A human possesses 5 senses and 6 perceptions. They are able to perceive shame, distinguish right from wrong, and comprehend pride and honor. However, souls are incapable of housing these. The more intense the emotion, the greater to the damage to one's soul. A soul oracle's emotion would cause huge ripples in their soul, resulting in their soul energy dissipating automatically. Chuckling softly, Xianxia raised his eyelids and asked, "Is there any mistake in what I've said?" Terrified, the voice stuttered, "Why you? The heaven is fair." Soul oracles were able to live a significantly longer lifespan than their peers, but in exchange, they had to suffer pain unimaginable by others. They were bound by innumerable restrictions. They weren't permitted to love or hate, and they were confined to remaining only within the shadows. Just that, the 5 soul declines was a classified secret among the soul oracles. Even the Master Teacher Pavilion failed to uncover this matter back then. So how in the world did this fellow learn of it? Was it because of the soul guiding formula? If that was really the case, wasn't his understanding of cultivation techniques a little, no, way too deep? After recovering from his shock, the voice harumphed. There's no need to talk so much. All cultivators, regardless of whether they are a soul oracle or not, are fighting against the heavens, so how can their lives possibly be smooth sailing? Soul oracles experience the 5 soul declines, but normal cultivators also experience the 5 ordeals: heaven, earth, human, wealth, and law. Since it is impossible to avoid suffering, one should just become a soul oracle and enjoy an unlimited lifespan. There was no cultivator whose safety was guaranteed. Crises revolved around the life of cultivator, be it from nature or other cultivators. Suffering and death were unavoidable. Someone had once made an estimate. Out of 1,000 cultivators, at least 999 would die on the journey to reaching transcendent mortal pinnacle. It was, In the truest sense, 1 in 1,000. Even though the presence of the Master-Teacher Pavilion had significantly reduced wars throughout the continent, there were still powers vying with one another for influence, cultivators fighting with one another for valuable artifacts, one's cultivation going berserk. These were all ordeals that cultivators had to face, and many had died in the midst of these struggles. Unlimited lifespan? Are you sure that a soul oracle's lifespan is unlimited? Xianxia shook his head. Even if one can avoid senescence decline by cultivating non-stop, are you sure that one can really stand this kind of suffering? If I'm not mistaken, your physical body has already decomposed entirely. Without a physical body to protect your soul, even though you're still sustaining your existence, you are undergoing immense anguish every single day. Putting everything aside, just talking about noon every day, when yang energy in the air is the most concentrated, are you sure you can get used to that sharp piercing pain on your soul? If not for this tomb being hidden deep beneath the lake, do you think that a soul like you have been able to survive until now? Why you? Hearing those words, the voice was no longer able to suppress his fear. His voice quivered even more vigorously. The other party was right. A soul could continue on for an eternity, but a body couldn't. Even when hiding in the darkest corner in the world, a soul without a body would still undergo tremendous pain at noon every day, making one wish that one was dead. In fact, the other party had thought of death innumerable times. However, as a soul, physical damage was ineffective against him as he wasn't able to kill himself. In the end, he could only continue living on in such a wretched manner. So, tell me, is there a problem with this cultivation technique? Is it worth learning it? Hearing that the voice had lost its composure, Xianxia pushed on. There's indeed a problem with it, but what kind of cultivation technique can be flawless? The voice screamed hoarsely. You're wrong. Look at this verse devoid of thoughts. Guide one's soul around the Qianzhu acupoint and leave via the Huishan acupoint. If it were to be changed to gather one's soul, break through the Huishan acupoint and escape through the Qianzhu acupoint, what do you think would happen? Asked Xianxia. The Qianzhu acupoint possesses a yang attribute, whereas the Huishan acupoint possesses a yin attribute. Naturally, a soul is of yin attribute and as such, it won't be affected by yin energy. Through this method, one can minimize the effect of searing yang decline or even completely nullify it. The owner of the voice was a soul oracle expert who had immersed himself in the study of souls for innumerable years. After hearing the new formula that Xianxia proposed, he began muttering and all of a sudden, he froze. The other party had only changed a few words, but this had changed the essence of the technique. Through using one's internal yang energy to nourish one's soul, one could reduce the effects of searing yang decline or even completely nullify it. It was just altering the sequence of the two acupoints, but it had further refined the soul-guiding formula, bringing it a significant distance closer to perfection. But, if you were to change it like that, there would be a high requirement on the quality of one's zhenqi. Otherwise, given how narrow one's Huishan acupoint with, a soul wrapped with zhenqi will surely be unable to pass through. After a moment of contemplation, the voice eventually deduced that it was impossible. Before drawing one's soul out of one's body, one had to wrap his soul with zhenqi first. If one's zhenqi wasn't pure enough, the impurities contained within would prevent one's soul from passing through the Huishan acupoint. Jiawei, display your zhenqi to him. Instead of answering him, Xianxia turned around and instructed. Yes, teacher. Stepping forward, Jiawei pointed his finger forward and a surge of zhenqi gushed out. This. Sensing the purity of the zhenqi, the voice trembled. Do you think it can pass through the Huishan acupoint? Xianxia chuckled. It can, but not everyone's zhenqi can be as pure as hers. The voice sounded slightly low. That's not a problem. Do you wish to learn it? Acknowledge me as your teacher then. Xianxia chuckled. I can teach you. Chapter 509, The Deceived Soul Oracle Pu. Hearing those words, Zhao Feiwu, Hall Master Han, and the others nearly coughed up a mouthful of blood. Aren't we in danger? Isn't the other party threatening to kill us? Soul oracles, as one of the most sinister occupation in the ancient times, are even more feared than poison masters. Not to mention, the other party is significantly stronger than them. possibly even reaching the zenith of transcendent mortal realm. How did it suddenly turn out that you are going to accept the other party as your student? Can it get even more exaggerated than this? Even though you are a master teacher, you have only barely stepped into the transcendent mortal realm. On the other hand, the other party is a transcendent mortal pinnacle expert. The gap between the two of you is immeasurable. Aren't you afraid of being killed for saying such words? Luo Zhu widened his eyes in shock. When this Xianxia first came to the Soul Oracle tomb, he didn't know anything about the occupation at all. However, just by glancing at the soul guiding formula, he immediately learned about the 5 soul declines and even found a way to solve it. It is no wonder why even the heaven acknowledges you. Your strength is truly fearsome. Sun Qiong and the others were also awed. As expected of young master, he is indeed as incredible as always. It doesn't matter whether the other party is a 6-star soul oracle or a transcendent mortal pinnacle expert, all have to bow before him. Acknowledge you as my teacher. The owner of the voice also seemed a little flabbergasted. As a 6-star oracle, a being whose cultivation has reached transcendent mortal pinnacle, how can I acknowledge you, a transcendent mortal Wundan ant, as my teacher? You must be pulling my leg. Audacious. Infuriated, his voice became sharp and piercing. Catcher! The sound of the mechanical trap whirring into operation sounded, and a gleam of light suddenly shot toward Xianxia, as though trying to teach him a lesson for his rudeness. Who? However, before it could even reach him, Xianxia had already stepped away, dodging the sword chi easily. No matter how formidable a mechanical trap was, it was inflexible. By using the Eye of Insight, Xianxia could make judgments beforehand and dodge assaults easily with the Heaven's Path movement art. It wouldn't be easy to hit him. There's no need to waste your efforts. If you were to make a move yourself, you might still be able to injure me. Mechanical traps. You should just drop this ludicrous idea. The trap at the entrance was stopped by me. Do you think that these things will be useful against me? Xianxia said impassively. HMPH. The voice harumphed furiously. Even though the mechanical trap at the entrance was powerful, the young man still managed to stop it with a single kick. No matter how powerful his mechanical trap here was, it was truly unlikely for him to be able to injure the other party. Thinking so, the owner of the voice fell silent. The mechanical traps also stopped their operation. Even though the mechanical trap was powered by the kinetic energy of the waterfall, there was still a limit to its ammunition. Seeing that the other party had dropped the idea of resorting to the mechanical traps, Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief within. Regarding the traps, if he had to come into direct contact with it before he could form a book, learn of its flaws, and deal with it. However, there were many mechanical traps scattered around the room, and Xianxia had no idea where they were as well. He might be able to dodge one, but if the other party were to attempt to launch all of the traps at once, given Xianxia's limited capability, it would be impossible for him to get away unscathed. In truth, the words he had just spoken were mostly a lie. He didn't really expect to succeed. Facing this kind of hidden adversary, he had to use his words to outwit the other party. It's such a pity. Even though the other party had stopped his assault, Xianxia had no intentions to stopping here. Shaking his head, he sighed in dismay. It's such a good opportunity, but you simply let it slip past you. Sigh, you are indeed such a soul brainless. You. Hearing those words, the voice nearly spurted blood from frustration and died on the spot. The heck? I am a 6-star soul oracle. Who do you think you are speaking like that to? Putting aside how you are only a transcendent mortal 1-dan cultivator, even a transcendent mortal 4-dan would have to tremble before me. Yet, how dare you dream of taking me in as your student, even going to the extent of calling me brainless? You are the one who is brainless. Your entire family is brainless. Don't think that I'll restrain myself just because I intend to possess one of you. If you are that intent to die, I don't mind granting your wish at this instant. The voice was laced with threat. Kill me. Do you dare? With a look of disdain, Xianxia glanced in front and said, Besides, you are just a monster who's been dead for innumerable years already. All you have left are your mechanical traps. If you can kill me, you would have done so yourself previously. You wouldn't be threatening me now. You, Watch you. If you have the capability, come and kill me now. Stop wasting time. Otherwise, hurry up and show us your 3 trials. To think that you are a 6-star soul oracle, how can you be so dumb? Xianxia sighed. Forget it. Even if you want to acknowledge me as your teacher now, I don't want to accept you anymore. I'm afraid that you'll pull down my reputation. You. The owner of the voice was about to explode. You are scared of your reputation being pulled down if I acknowledge you as my teacher? Can you be any more shameless than that? Seeing that the other party was leaping in anger, Xianxia continued, Why? Has all of your cultivation has gone to your mouth, and you are incapable of fighting anymore? You are seeking death. Seeing Xianxia's annoying face, the owner of the voice exploded. Hong long. A violent ripple diffused in the air and an overwhelming might suddenly crushed down on the crowd. The Soul Oracle was initially hesitant to fight for fear of combat decline. However, choking with anger from the words of the young lad before him, he could no longer hold himself back anymore. Hula! A force suddenly crushed on Xianxia's neck, as though an intangible hand was grabbing onto it, lifting him up. Teacher! Xianxia! Seeing that the Soul Oracle was provoked into making a move, everyone panicked. They hurriedly rushed forward. You want to kill me? It won't be that easy. Despite being suffocated, Xianxia didn't panic. Instead, chuckling lightly, he willed and a grey scale-like object appeared before him. Wang! A light buzz. A barrier of light embraced his body. As though coming into contact with burning oil, the hand grabbing onto Xianxia quickly retracted. Ah! The voice yelled in agony. From the looks of it, he seemed to have sustained significant injuries from it. Dragon Scale Amulet. This was the object that he'd obtained at the appraiser hall some time ago. Based on the evaluation of the Library of Heaven's Path, it could ward off the attack of a transcendent mortal 9-dan expert 3 times. The time had finally come to use it. An amulet only had protective capabilities. However, once activated, it would return the force from the other party's assault back to him in the form of a backlash. This was precisely the reason why Xianxia intentionally used his words to provoke the other party into action. In any case, he could use this amulet thrice. Furthermore, as long as the fellow remained hidden, everyone else could only be manipulated by him. Thus, Xianxia decided to lure him out despite the potential risks. Besides, given the age of the tomb, the other party was likely to have been dormant for a significant period of time already. His cultivation would have surely already deteriorated greatly, and in his weakened state, it was impossible for him to break the defense dragon scale amulet. With just a single strike, the other party was already severely injured. Everyone thought that Xianxia would be doomed given how the powerful Soul Oracle decided to make a move himself. They didn't expect him to possess a tool so strong that it could even injure a 6-star Soul Oracle. As such, they were astonished by the sight. I will kill you. Severely injured, the Soul Oracle flew into a frenzy. He bellowed furiously as he prepared to launch a second round of attack. You want to kill me? You might have been able to succeed a moment ago, but now, I'm afraid you don't stand a chance anymore. The barrier of light could be sustained for several breaths. Seeing that it hasn't dissipated yet, Xianxia charged forward toward the stone tablet. He didn't know where the other party was previously, so there was no way for him to attack the other party at all. However, after the other party had executed a battle technique, not only did the Library of Heaven's Path reflect the other party's flaws, it had even detailed his current location. Hong long. With the immense might of 200,000 ding, the stone tablet was immediately smashed to smithereens. After smashing the tablet inscribed with the soul-guiding formula, Xianxia didn't stop. Instead, he continued charging all the way to the coffin. Just as everyone thought that he would forcefully smash open the coffin, the other party's hands swiftly pat on several places over the coffin, his movement so swift that it left after images in its wake. Bah 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 bah. It was a consecutive 16 pats. There was seemingly no specific logic behind his blows, and his strikes weren't heavy either. With such force, he might have been able to break ordinary boulders, but it was completely useless against a coffin that was crafted by a high-ranked blacksmith like this. No one had any idea what he was thinking of. After that, he paused for a moment. Just as everyone was baffled by Xianxia's actions, the latter suddenly turned around. "Hall Master Sai, your saber." "Saber? All right." Hall Master Sai was taken aback for a moment before registering what Xianxia said. Flicking his wrist, he took out a saber and threw it to the other party. It was the same one that Xianxia used back at the Formation Master Guild to carve the formation plate. Grabbing the saber, Xianxia's aura abruptly changed. A sharp aura suddenly emanated from his body. Huala! The saber fell down with immense might. Boom! As soon as the saber came into contact with the coffin, a loud explosion sounded. It was as though someone had lit an explosive within the coffin, causing the thick coffin lid to blow up and burst into the surroundings. The immense force from the explosion lodged the fragments of the coffin lid onto the tough wall. Shattered by none, the lock of crimson metal, an undisturbed rest for 10 millenniums. This is a crimson metal coffin. Even a transcendent mortal 9 Dan would be helpless before it. For Xianxia to break it open with a single slash. How is this possible? Upon seeing the sight, while others didn't think much of it, Luo Zhu's body trembled in shock. He was on the verge of going insane. Crimson metal coffin? You mean, the crimson metal coffin crafted by 6-star blacksmiths using an alloy of deep ocean metals? Upon seeing Luo Zhu's state, Hall Master Sai fell into a short moment of contemplation when realization suddenly struck him, and his eyes narrowed. Indeed. It's that crimson metal coffin. Luo Zhu nodded his head. Isn't it said that, once the coffin is sealed, no one will be able to open it? Why would? Realizing the impossibility of the matter, Hall Master Sai also went into a frenzy. As the head of the appraiser hall, he had seen countless invaluable artifacts, and he had heard of many different treasures as well. Generally, coffins could be divided into 9 main grades. Take for example, the 4 coffins at the other chamber are known as Grade 7 adamantine coffin, forged using incomparably resilient top-quality metal. Even spirit intermediate tier weapons would find it hard to break it. And above the 9 grades of metal was crimson metal. Crimson metal coffins were crafted by 6-star blacksmith. It was designed such that once it was sealed, no thief below the cultivation of transcendent mortal 9 Dan would be able to break it. Such came the saying shattered by none, the lock of crimson metal, an undisturbed rest for 10 millenniums. In order to not be disturbed after death, many powerful cultivators would specially hire a blacksmith to craft a coffin of that tier for them so as to ensure that their corpses would remain intact and that no petty tomb raiders would be able to disturb their peace. For Xianxia to break a coffin that only transcendent mortal pinnacle experts could break, how could they not be astonished? It was already an amazing feat that they didn't faint upon realization. To see through the flaw of the soul-guiding formula with a single look, to injure a 6-star soul oracle, and to break the crimson metal coffin with a single slash. Was this Xianxia really just a transcendent mortal 1 Dan? Chapter 510, 7 Hearts Underworld Lotus. Before the duo could recover from their shock, Xianxia's saber continued slashing down and struck a corpse lying in the coffin. Huala! As soon as the corpse came into contact with the saber, it was immediately reduced to dust, scattering into all directions. The body of a transcendent 9 Dan should be as though tough as diamond. How could it possibly be reduced to dust by a single strike of saber chi? When one's cultivation reached transcendent mortal 9 Dan, not only would one's soul energy increase, one's physical body would also become flawless. As though a diamond, it would become impervious to corrosion and no weapon would be able to leave a mark on it. Even after death, considering how the corpse had been protected by a crimson metal coffin all along, it shouldn't have been reduced to dust by a single strike of a transcendent mortal 1 Dan cultivator. Could Xianxia's saber art really be that strong? That's not it. While Xianxia's saber art and saber chi are strong, he still isn't strong enough to break a crimson metal coffin and reduce the physical body of a transcendent mortal 9 Dan into dust, Jin Songhai said with a grim expression. After consuming a pill, he had recovered significantly from his previous injury. Then what's going on? Let's continue watching first. Xianxia will definitely have an explanation for it. Jin Songhai shook his head. Everyone turned their attention to the man in front of them. Xianxia didn't stop after dissipating the 2 Mona's corpse with a single slash. With a flick of his wrist, he whipped out several silver needles and tossed them into the coffin. As the silver needle shot into the coffin, everyone suddenly heard a piercing scream. "Ah! What are you doing?" It came from the mysterious voice from before. At this moment, the arrogance in that fellow's voice had disappeared altogether, replaced by fear and disbelief. "I'm not doing anything much, just digging you up." Chuckling lightly, Xianxia slotted his saber deep into the coffin and flicked his saber up. Who? A black lotus appeared before everyone. This lotus was around the size of a palm, and a black aura shrouded its tip. Every single one of its leaves were pierced with silver needles. The silver needles that Xianxia shot before were aimed exactly at this flower. To think that such a peculiar lotus would be hiding beneath an indestructible crimson metal coffin in this incredibly deep tomb. Even when seeing it with their own eyes, everyone still took in a deep breath, unable to believe their sight. Who? In truth, it had only been a few breaths since the two Mona attacked Xianxia to when the lotus was unearthed. Only at this instant did the dragon scale amulet's glowing barrier finally disappear. Could this be? Upon seeing the lotus, Luo Zhu contemplated for a moment when something suddenly struck him. His eyes rapidly narrowed and with a quivering voice, he uttered, "7 Hearts Underworld Lotus." 7 Hearts Underworld Lotus? What is that? Hall Master Sai asked out of curiosity. Even though he was knowledgeable, he wasn't omniscient. Soul Oracle was a mysterious occupation even during the ancient times, and very little was detailed about them. It is said to be an invaluable treasure for soul oracles. It can be used to forge a new physical body, and on top of that, the forged physical body will possess a unique constitution. Luo Zhu explained. Unique constitution. Hall Master Sai widened his eyes in shock. As long as one's unique constitution was activated, one's rate of cultivation would exceed ordinary cultivators by many times. To be able to forge a physical body that possessed a unique constitution, that was way too fearsome. Indeed. However, something seems amiss. A moment later, Luo Zhu hesitated. What's wrong? The 7 Hearts Underworld Lotus survives by absorbing energy. If I'm not mistaken, the corpse of the two Mona must have been absorbed clean. Otherwise, it's impossible for a transcendent mortal 9 Dan corpse to be reduced to dust by Zhongsha's strike. Luo Zhu said. UN. Hall Master Sai nodded in agreement. They had been perplexed over how Xianxia managed to reduce a transcendent mortal 9 Dan corpse into dust with his sword qi. From the looks of it now, this bizarre flower must have sapped the energy remaining within the body dry. Since the transcendent mortal 9 Dan corpse had been used to nourish the lotus should have already bloomed and turned into the two Mona's physical body. Why would he still be lying in the coffin, trying to possess us? Luo Zhu finally asked doubtfully. This. Hall Master Sai and the others, realizing the bizarreness of the situation, fell into contemplation. Indeed. If the other party had an invaluable object like the 7 Hearts Underworld Lotus which could serve as his physical body, why would he need to possess others? Not to mention, even going through all of the trouble of having everyone cultivate the soul-guiding formula. Wasn't this a completely pointless action? I don't understand it either. However, I think Zhongsha might have the answer. Otherwise, he couldn't have possibly opened the coffin and dug out this lotus. Luo Zhu said. UN. Everyone immediately turned their eyes over to Xianxia. At the coffin, that voice was still screaming. You, let me go. Being dug up, the black lotus screeched in fright. The two Mona who had threatened to kill everyone earlier was hiding inside. It was no wonder that they couldn't find the origin of the voice earlier. Given that the two Mona was hidden in a lotus beneath the coffin, how could they possibly have found him? Let you go. So that you can continue killing us. Xianxia rolled his eyes. Why you? As long you as let me go, we can talk things through. As a soul oracle, I have accumulated quite a lot of treasures. I can give them all to you. If you desire, this 7 Hearts Underworld Lotus can be yours as well, that voice said anxiously. Give this lotus to me. No thanks. Xianxia harumphed. Also, You spoke of the treasures you accumulated? Haven't you exchanged all of them into spirit stones to feed this lotus already?
How did you know?
A frightened voice echoed from within the lotus.
How did I know?
The dust around the lotus all came from crumbled spirit stones. It's not like I'm blind.
Xianxia shook his head.
In truth, it wasn't that the lotus was buried underground. Rather, it was placed with a huge stack of spirit stones. However, after the spiritual energy from those spirit stones were extracted, they became a layer of dust covering the lotus. Xianxia had once used a spirit gathering formation to extract spiritual energy from spirit stones, and a large quantity of similar waste product had appeared before. Thus, he was able to recognize it at first sight. Furthermore, this dust was more translucent and paler than the low-tier spirit stones that he used for his training. Most probably, the spirit stones used were at least of middle tier. Judging from the size of the pile, that must be at least a mountain of 10,000 middle-tier spirit stones. Even for a 6-star soul oracle, that should be his entire wealth. Having deduced all of this, how could Xianxia possibly fall for the other party's lies?
Why you?
The lotus trembled violently as though it had seen a ghost. It seemed like in all of his clashes with the other party, he hadn't even won once. The other party seemed to be omniscient, knowing every single thing about him.
All of you, come over.
Ignoring the two moaners' frightened shivering, Xianxia waved his hands and beckoned the rest of the group over. Only then did the others rush forward. Unable to stand the intrigue any longer, Zhao Feiwu asked, "Xianxia, what is going on?" Everyone also stared at Xianxia with a look of bewilderment. Everything had happened too abruptly. It was just a moment ago that the two-moaner was laughing gleefully at controlling everyone's life and death when, in the blink of an eye, he was dug out from the ground. This bizarre turn of events had left everyone completely baffled.
What's going on?
I think you should be the one to explain. Xianxia patted the black lotus in front of him.
Huala.
The black lotus trembled slightly. At this moment, the voice seemed to have turned mute, unable to speak a single word at all. It seemed like being found and pummeled by a transcendent mortal Wundan weakling had left it so stifled that it didn't feel like talking at all. Do you think that you have a choice? Seeing that the other party was unwilling to cooperate, Xianxia lifted his hand and a needle appeared between his fingertips. Then, with a swift movement, the needle impaled a leaf of the lotus.
Ow!
A cry of agony immediately sounded within the lotus, and the voice hurriedly gave in, I'll speak, I'll speak. The voice sounded much feebler than before. Clearly, the silver needle had struck its vitals, resulting in a tremendous fall in its strength. Let's hurry up and begin then. Plucking out the silver needle, Xianxia infused Zhenqi into the silver needle once more, causing it to gleam coldly. It seemed that if that fellow were to hesitate for even an instant, the needle would immediately impale the lotus's body.
Yes.
Terrified by the threat, the lotus trembled and hurriedly spoke. I am a 6-star soul oracle, and my cultivation has reached transcendent mortal 9-dan pinnacle. However, even until the very end, I failed to make the final step. Even though my soul still managed to live on, my physical body reached its limit. At transcendent mortal realm, one's longevity would be increased by twofold. However, that would only add up to 200 years. Even those who were blessed with exceptionally long lifespans only managed to reach 300 at maximum. As long as one didn't surpass this realm, one's physical body would be restrained by that limit. This was the way of the world. Even though soul oracles could sustain themselves by possessing others, naturally, their own body was still the most compatible with their soul. It was then that I found this 7 Hearts Underworld Lotus. The voice continued, this item is the greatest treasure for us soul oracles. As long as it matures, it can be molded into a physical body, not to mention, the body would possess a unique constitution. With this, I might just be able to overcome the last hurdle and surpass the transcendent mortal realm. Thus, I began making preparations for my funeral and squandered all my wealth on building a tomb. This is all so that I can focus my efforts on nurturing this lotus. Everyone nodded their heads. In truth, they had been a little intrigued by the existence of this tomb. Since soul oracles were able to possess the body of other cultivators, why would one waste their fortune and effort on building a tomb beneath a river? From the looks of it now, it was all so that he could nurture this lotus without any disturbances. After all, given how rare and valuable the lotus was, it would be disastrous if other soul oracles were to learn of it. Thus, he chose to fake his death. Even though soul oracles were able to achieve immortality via their soul, they were impeded by the 5 soul declines, so it wasn't entirely impossible for a soul oracle to die. Thus, the other soul oracles didn't suspect a thing when he buried himself in his tomb. But if that is the case, why haven't you succeeded yet?
Xianxia asked.
Soul oracles had already been destroyed for dozens of millenniums already, so this tomb surely had a longer history than that. Judging from such, the other party should have been done nurturing the lotus by now already. But if that was the case, why was he still in such a state now? After all, if he had succeeded, he would have already molded the lotus into a new body for himself already. Why was he still stuck inside the lotus, unable to leave? Hearing the question, the voice hesitated for a moment before replying. After the tomb was built, I faked my death and began nurturing this lotus. I thought that, given my strength and experience, I'd be able to succeed swiftly. However, I never thought that I would actually fail.
Fail?
Xianxia was perplexed. Since you went to the extent of faking your death, you must know the method to nurturing this lotus. How did you fail? That fellow had prepared for this matter over such a long time, converting all of his possession into spirit stones and burying himself underground, even going to the extent of finding a celestial designer to build the tomb and a 6-star craftsman to forge the coffin. With such thorough preparations, how did the other party fail? That's because... The tomb owner's voice trembled, as though recalling something fearsome. This isn't a 7 hearts underworld lotus, but a 9 hearts lotus. Thank you for listening to Panda Audiobooks. If you love what you hear and want to support my work, check out the PayPal link in the description. Every bit helps. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notifications bell to stay updated with all our latest audiobook chapters. We'll see you in the next one.